I've been living a lie for 4 years now, and it's inked right into my skin. My boyfriend thinks I got a matching tattoo to symbolize our love and commitment, a meaningful milestone in our relationship. The truth? That tattoo has nothing to do with us. I just panicked and picked the first thing I saw. Let me back up. We've been dating for about a year when he suggested getting matching tattoos. And when I say suggested, I mean he was all in. He showed up one day, all excited, waving his phone around with Pinterest boards full of ideas. I could feel the pressure settling in like a weighted blanket. Only, not the cozy kind. Don't get me wrong, I love him to death. But matching tattoos? Forever ink? That felt big. Too big. At the time, I wasn't sure if we were until death do us part territory yet. What if we broke up? What if I ended up with a reminder of this guy on my body for life? And he moved on to date someone named Brittany or something. The thought alone gave me cold sweats. But I also didn't want to be the one who chickened out. It felt like a test. Like if I said no, I'd be admitting I wasn't fully invested in us. And he was so excited. So I did what any mature adult would do. I pretended to be totally into it while spiraling on the inside. On the day of the appointment, we were still arguing about the design. He wanted us to get these minimalist line art waves because, according to him, love is like the ocean. It ebbs and flows. Yeah, barf. I tried to pitch something smaller, something I could easily cover up if we ever crashed and burned. But no, he wanted the waves. He said it would be symbolic, deep, poetic. I wanted to tell him it just sounded wet and salty. Anyway, there we were, sitting in the tattoo parlor, and I was frantically trying to psych myself up for this decision. The artist calls us over, and my boyfriend goes first, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. He gets his wave tattoo on his arm, and it looks good. Simple. Neat. He's beaming at me, all proud, like we just unlocked a new level in our relationship. Then it was my turn. The artist asks what design I want, and that's when it hit me. I didn't want the stupid wave. I just didn't. But there was no way I could back out now without ruining the moment. So instead of admitting that, I blurted out the first thing I saw hanging on the wall behind the counter. An abstract drawing of a lizard. Yeah, a freaking lizard. The artist gave me this confused look like, "Are you sure?" My boyfriend looked just as confused, but I was in too deep to turn back. I nodded and said, "Yup, the lizard, right here on my ankle." I told them it was meaningful to me, that it symbolized resilience or some nonsense. In truth, it symbolized nothing. It was just a random-ass lizard. I don't know what came over me in that moment. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe I just panicked. Or maybe some deep, weird part of me always wanted a lizard tattoo. And this was its time to shine? Who knows? The artist shrugged, printed out the stencil, and 15 minutes later, there I was, with a bold, geometric lizard permanently crawling across my ankle. When my boyfriend asked why I switched designs at the last second, I scrambled for an answer. I wanted something that would reflect my personal journey, I said, hoping it sounded profound. He just nodded, looking mildly impressed. And that was that. Now here's where things get complicated. My boyfriend thinks the lizard is our thing. Somewhere along the way, he convinced himself that the lizard represents our relationship. He tells people it's our spirit animal, as if we're some kind of mystical desert couple. I've overheard him say things like, "Yeah, it's a symbol of how we've adapted and grown together." And every time he says it, I have to resist the urge to scream. It's just a stupid lizard. I panicked. But that's not even the worst part. The worst part is that he loves the lizard. Like, really loves it. I've caught him doodling it on napkins when we're out at restaurants. He bought a tiny lizard charm for my keychain, saying it was our little mascot. One time, we were at a museum, and he dragged me over to the reptile exhibit to take a photo with an actual lizard. "It's like fate," he said, grinning from ear to ear. Meanwhile, I was standing there trying not to die inside. And now, he wants to get another matching tattoo, a bigger version of the lizard on our ribs. He even suggested getting a little crown on the lizard's head to symbolize how we've conquered life together. I am this close to faking a severe fear of reptiles just to get out of it. Honestly, at this point, I've just leaned into the lie. When people ask about the tattoo, I go along with the story. Yeah, it really represents our journey. I'll say, try to sound sincere while internally wondering how I've let it go this far. I've even started researching random lizard facts so I don't sound like a fraud. Did you know some lizards can regenerate their tails? Now I do. Thanks, anxiety. Part of me knows I'll have to come clean eventually. But how do you tell someone you love that the deeply symbolic tattoo they've cherished for years is just a spur-of-the-moment lizard that you chose because you were too scared to commit to a wave? It feels like one of those truths that might actually be more damaging than the lie. So for now, I just smile and let him believe in the magic of the lizard. Maybe, in a way, the lizard has become a symbol of us. A weird, awkward, unplanned thing that we've somehow made work, just like our relationship. Or maybe I'm just overthinking it. Either way, I'm stuck with this lizard for life. And honestly, it's starting to grow on me. It was a cold, drizzly Thursday afternoon, and I was tucked into my usual corner at the local coffee shop, trying to squeeze some productivity out of the last hour of daylight. My laptop was open, a half-finished document glaring at me, and a steaming oat milk latte sat dangerously close to the edge of the table. I was in the zone, or at least pretending to be, when I noticed a guy hovering by the counter. Now, I need you to understand something. Approaching a stranger in a coffee shop is risky business. It's right on that thin line between cute me cute and, can I just drink my latte in peace? Honestly, there's no in between. Coffee shops are weird liminal spaces. Sometimes people are open to a conversation, and sometimes they just want to sit in silence, doom scrolling on their phones. This guy, however, played his cards well from the start. I caught him giving the room a quick once-over, not in a creepy, scoping out targets way, but more like he was scanning to see if anyone was already engaged in something important. Pro tip, we notice when you're trying to pick your moment. It's subtle, but appreciated. I figured he was going to leave it at that, but instead, he approached the barista and asked for a recommendation, making an exaggerated show of being indecisive. So, be honest, he said loud enough for me, and probably half the cafe, to hear. Which one tastes less like sadness? The cold brew or the mocha? Now, that got a laugh, not just from the barista, but from me too. It wasn't forced. It was just the right amount of goofy and self-deprecating to make it feel natural. And here's the kicker. He didn't look at me when I laughed. He wasn't fishing for attention, and that alone made me more curious. He ordered his drink, a mocha if you're wondering, because caffeine and sugar are non-negotiable, and I figured that was the end of it. But a few minutes later, as he waited for his drink, he glanced over at me with a friendly smile. "Laptop Warriors Unite, huh?" he said, nodding toward my screen. I gave a half smile, something like that, mostly trying to look busy so no one talks to me. He chuckled, and it was a genuine, not annoying kind of laugh. Well, mission accomplished, sort of. I mean, you've got the laptop, the latte, the focused expression. All you're missing is the oversized headphones. That got me. It was light, observational, and didn't feel forced. And look, that's the trick. If you're going to strike up a conversation, it needs to feel like it came out of nowhere, but also like it couldn't have gone any other way. He wasn't trying too hard. He wasn't looming over my table, waiting for permission to speak. He just tossed a comment into the air, and if I didn't want to engage, I knew he would have been totally fine with that. But here's the thing, I didn't want to engage. So I closed my laptop a little. Not fully, just enough to say, "Okay, you've got my attention for the next 30 seconds. Use them wisely." He took that cue and pulled out a chair, not sitting down, just resting his hand on the back like a polite little question mark. "Mind if I sit?" Or, "Do you need to get back to pretending to work?" Smooth. Very smooth. I appreciated that he asked, and even more, I appreciated the fact that I could say no if I wanted to. This is another key point for anyone taking notes. Giving someone an easy out makes you seem confident, not desperate. I shrugged and motioned to the chair. Sure, why not? The document will still be miserable when I get back to it. He grinned, sat down, and held up his hands like a referee calling a clean play. "Don't worry, I won't keep you long. Just figured I'd steal a little break while the mocha cools off. I'm Alex, by the way." Notice how he introduced himself early? That's another good move. No weird, so, "What's your name?" Interrogation. Just a casual, "Here's who I am. Take it or leave it." "I'm Jess," I said. "Nice to meet you, Jess. So tell me, how serious are we talking here? Like, full-blown procrastination, or just taking a strategic breather?" He gestured toward my closed laptop. "Definitely procrastination," I admitted. The kind where you tell yourself 5 more minutes every 5 minutes until it's suddenly dinner time. He laughed again, and I could feel the tension of the day starting to lift. The conversation flowed easily from there. Nothing too personal, just small talk about the weather, our mutual distaste for deadlines, and how the cafe's Wi-Fi always seems to stop working the second you actually need it. Now, here's where things could have gone wrong. He didn't ask if I had a boyfriend. Thank God. He didn't ask for my Instagram, didn't hit me with his "Do you come here often?" Instead, he treated the interaction like a quick, friendly chat, not a high-pressure audition for a date. That's what made it work. It felt like we were just two people killing time in the same place, not two actors locked in a scene with romantic subtext. Eventually, his drink was ready, and he stood up, giving me an easy grin. "All right, Jess, I'll let you get back to your productive procrastination. But if you ever want to procrastinate together, say over coffee or something that doesn't involve staring at screens, here's my number." And with that, he pulled a small, neat card from his pocket. Honestly, the fact that it wasn't a crumpled receipt from his pocket was a nice touch. It just had his first name, number, and a little coffee cup doodle. I took it, smiled, and tucked it into my laptop case. "Thanks, Alex. Have a good one." "You too," he said, and this is the most important part, he left. No lingering, no awkward hovering to see if I'd text him right away. Just a polite exit, like he was genuinely fine with however things played out. And you know what? I did text him, not because he was some dazzling conversationalist, or because the stars aligned perfectly in that coffee shop. I texted him because he made the interaction feel effortless, respectful, and above all, normal. No pressure, no weird vibes, just a quick moment of connection. The moral of the story: if you're thinking of approaching someone at a coffee shop, or anywhere really, take notes from Alex. Keep it light. Make an observation that fits the moment. Introduce yourself early. Give the other person space to respond, or not. And for the love of God, don't linger. The trick isn't to wow someone with charm, or win them over with relentless effort. It's about making a moment feel natural, easy, and respectful. And if they don't want to engage, no harm done. Smile, wish them well, and walk away with your dignity intact. Sometimes, that's all it takes to leave a lasting impression, and maybe even get a text back. It was supposed to be the chillest summer ever. I had just finished my sophomore year of college, and my best friend Lucas and I decided to spend a break at his family's lake house. It was this cozy cabin by the water, complete with jet skis, a bonfire pit, and a fridge that was always stocked. The plan was simple: booze, boats, and no responsibilities. I didn't expect that summer to leave me haunted for years. Lucas's mom, Claire, was going through a tough time back then. Recently divorced, trying to find herself, or whatever. Lucas mentioned she was acting different, doing yoga, going to bars alone, dressing like someone half her age. He laughed about it, saying she's having her midlife crisis early. I didn't think much of it at the time. I had met Claire a few times before, and yeah, she was attractive in that way moms shouldn't be. You know, the kind, fit, tan, always glowing like she just stepped out of a spa. But in my mind, she was just Lucas's mom. An off-limits entity. That's how it should have stayed. Until it didn't. One Saturday, Lucas decided to go back to the city for a couple of days to visit his girlfriend. He asked if I wanted to come, but I figured I'd stay at the cabin. Just me, the lake, and some much-needed alone time. Claire was staying too, but it wasn't supposed to be a big deal. I mean, she was his mom. What could possibly happen? The first night alone wasn't bad. I grilled some burgers, cracked open a couple of beers, and watched Netflix on my laptop. Claire joined me on the deck around sunset, holding a glass of wine and wearing this sundress that I immediately told myself not to notice. "Hope you don't mind the company," she said, sitting across from me. "It gets quiet around here, doesn't it?" We made small talk, mostly about the lake and how Lucas's dad was a complicated man. She seemed relaxed, but there was this energy in the air, like when a conversation lingers just a little too long in the wrong direction. And then, out of nowhere, Claire said, "You know, I'm glad Lucas brought you here. It's nice having someone around who isn't so emotionally unavailable." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, glad to be here." She smiled in this way that made my stomach flip. "So, no girlfriend waiting for you back home?" Alarm bells started going off in my brain. No, just me. She said, swirling her wine. A shame. We sat in silence for a moment. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the deck in warm twilight. And that's when Claire leaned in, just slightly, just enough to make me wonder if this was really happening. You know, she said softly, you've grown up a lot since I last saw you. I should have walked inside, should have laughed it off and gone to bed. But I didn't. I just sat there like an idiot, feeling the wine buzz hum through my veins, waiting to see what would happen next. It didn't take long for things to cross the point of no return. We were sitting closer than two people in our situation should have been. 1 second, we were talking about the stars. The next, she had her hand on my thigh, and my heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. This is probably a bad idea, I whispered, my brain finally catching up to my body. Probably, Claire whispered back. And then she kissed me. I froze for a moment, just long enough for her to take it as permission. Her lips were soft, her perfume intoxicating. It felt wrong. It was wrong, but there was no going back now. We stumbled inside, knocking over an empty beer bottle on the way to the couch. My brain was screaming, "What are you doing? What the hell is wrong with you?" But my body had made its choice, and apparently, it wasn't interested in logic. The next morning was pure chaos in my head. I woke up with Claire curled next to me, her hand draped over my chest like we were some kind of couple. For a few blissful seconds, I forgot where I was. And then it all came crashing back. Oh my God, I just slept with Lucas's mom. I carefully slid out from under her arm and grabbed my clothes, moving as quietly as a burglar. My heart was pounding so loud, I thought it might wake her. I needed to get out of there fast. Just as I was sneaking toward the door, Claire stirred. "Leaving already?" she murmured sleepily. I turned, halfway dressed, caught between panic and politeness. "Oh, yeah, just going for a walk." She smiled, completely unfazed. "Come back when you're done." I bolted out the door like my life depended on it. I spent the rest of that day pacing around the lake, trying to figure out how I'd let things go so off the rails. I kept thinking about Lucas, how he'd kill me if he ever found out. But the worst part was, I couldn't stop thinking about Claire. And she knew it. Later that afternoon, she found me sitting by the dock, staring at the water like it held all the answers. "You've been quiet," she said, sitting next to me. "Regretting last night?" I shook my head, even though I knew the answer was yes. "It's just complicated." She laughed softly. "It doesn't have to be. It can just be fun." That was the moment I knew I was screwed. I tried telling myself it would only happen once, that it was just a mistake, a moment of weakness. But Claire wasn't done with me. Not by a long shot. The next few days were a blur of sneaking around. We hooked up every chance we got, on the deck, in the kitchen, even in the boathouse. Every time I told myself it would be the last. And every time I gave in, it was thrilling and terrifying all at once. The constant fear of getting caught made it feel like we were playing with fire. And we were. Then, 2 days before Lucas was supposed to come back, it happened. We were in the kitchen, tangled up in each other, when the front door swung open. "Hey, I'm back early." It was Lucas. Claire and I jumped apart like we'd been hit by lightning. My heart was in my throat as Lucas walked into the kitchen, totally unaware of what he'd just interrupted. "Dude," he said, grinning, "you're still here? Thought you'd bail by now." I forced a laugh, trying to act normal. "Nah, man, just hanging out." Claire, to her credit, didn't miss a beat. "We were just making lunch." "Hungry?" Lucas shrugged. "Sure, I'll grab a beer first." As he headed to the fridge, Claire shot me a quick glance, a mix of amusement and warning. I knew, right then and there, that we'd gotten away with it, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a time bomb. To this day, Lucas has no idea. Claire and I never talked about it after that summer, and I stopped visiting the lake house altogether. Every now and then, I'll see her post something on Facebook, and it all comes rushing back. The thrill, the guilt, the constant fear of getting caught. I wish I could say I learned something from it. But the truth is, some mistakes don't come with lessons. They just leave you with memories you'd rather forget. I still remember the message from the agency like it just happened. Your 9 p.m. client requested champagne. Be friendly. Be discreet. That was the only instruction they gave me. as if I'd know what the hell to do just by holding a bottle of bubbly. I was so new, I still didn't know the difference between escorting and just hanging out with someone. Were we talking hand-holding or the whole other thing? I was too nervous to ask, so I just went along with it, hoping for the best and praying I wouldn't trip on my own shoes. By 8:45, I was standing outside a penthouse hotel room, clutching a chilled bottle of champagne like it was the answer to all my problems. My palms were slick with sweat, and I kept practicing an opening line in my head. "Hi, I'm here for fun." No, that sounded awful. "Hello, shall we begin?" No, too creepy. Before I could second-guess myself further, the door swung open. A tall, elegant woman in her mid-40s stood in the doorway, dressed in a silk robe that somehow looked both casual and expensive. She smiled, not unkindly, and said, "You must be Liam." "Yes, ma'am," I stammered, clutching the champagne tighter. "Ma'am," she raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "I'm not your boss. Call me Nina." The inside of the penthouse was the kind of luxury I'd only seen on Instagram. Plush furniture, gold accents, a skyline view that made the city below look like a postcard. Nina gestured toward a marble-topped bar. "Pop that bottle open, would you?" Now, I'd like to think of myself as a competent adult. I've opened beer bottles, wine bottles, even struggled through a few stubborn jars in my day. But champagne? Apparently, that was my nemesis. I fumbled with the foil wrapper, wrestling with the cork as Nina watched with thinly veiled amusement. "Do you need help?" she asked, already reaching for the bottle. No, I got this," I insisted, determined to prove that I could at least perform one task correctly on my first night. I twisted the cork harder, gritting my teeth. And then pop! The cork flew out like a missile, hit the chandelier, and bounced off a vase, which promptly tipped over and smashed onto the floor. "Oh shit!" I gasped, frozen in place as champagne foamed over my hands. Nina stared at the broken vase for a moment, then at me, and then, "Thank God," she burst out laughing. "Relax, Liam," she said between giggles. "That thing was ugly anyway." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and sheepishly set the champagne down. "Well, I guess that's one way to break the ice. Or everything else," she teased, handing me a glass. "But don't worry, I like a man with enthusiasm." We sat down on the couch, and for a moment, I wondered what would happen next. The uncertainty was eating me alive. Was this the part where we got down to business? Or was I supposed to entertain her first? Do escorts tell jokes? Talk about the weather? I had no idea. "So," Nina said, swirling the champagne in her glass, "tell me something interesting about yourself." I blinked. Interesting? I hadn't prepared for that. My life wasn't exactly thrilling. I can fold a fitted sheet," I offered weakly. Nina laughed again, a genuine, hearty laugh that made me feel like maybe I wasn't screwing up as badly as I thought. "A man of hidden talents," she said with a wink. We talked for a while after that about everything and nothing. She told me about her career in fashion, how exhausting it was to pretend she cared about things like fabric swatches and influencer collaborations. I told her about moving to the city and how I'd taken this job out of sheer desperation. Surprisingly, she didn't judge. If anything, she seemed sympathetic. "Everyone's been desperate at some point," she said softly. "You'd be surprised how many people in this town are just faking it until they make it." For a moment, it felt like I was just hanging out with someone, no pressure, no expectations. It was nice, but then, inevitably, the conversation shifted. "So," Nina said, setting her glass down, "what do you say we make this evening a little more interesting?" There it was, the moment I'd been dreading. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to figure out how to respond. Did she mean what I thought she meant? Or was this another test, like the champagne? Before I could spiral any further, Nina leaned in and whispered, "Relax, Liam. I'm not going to bite, unless you ask nicely." I let out a nervous laugh, and she gave me a knowing smile. "Let's just take it slow, okay? No pressure." The rest of the night unfolded in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't some wild, cinematic encounter. There was no awkward fumbling, no over-the-top seduction. Just two people figuring each other out. Tentative, playful, and surprisingly easy. Nina was patient, guiding me when I needed it, but never pushing too hard. And weirdly, I found myself enjoying it, not just the physical part, but the connection. At one point, she stopped and looked at me, her expression softer than before. "You're doing great, you know that?" I didn't, but hearing it felt nice. When the night ended, Nina handed me an envelope thicker than I'd expected. "You've earned it," she said with a smile. "And if you ever want to do this again, you know where to find me." I left the penthouse feeling a strange mix of relief, pride, and disbelief. I'd survived my first job, and not just survived, I'd actually done okay. The champagne debacle aside, it had been kind of fun, certainly not what I'd imagined when I first signed up for this gig. On the walk home, I kept thinking about Nina's words. Everyone's faking it until they make it. Maybe she was right. Maybe life was just one long series of trial and error moments, and the trick was to laugh through the mistakes, like broken vases and flying champagne corks. I didn't stick with the escorting gig for long. It wasn't really my thing in the end. But that first night with Nina taught me something important. Life rarely goes according to plan, and sometimes the best you can do is roll with the chaos. And, for the love of God, learn how to properly open a bottle of champagne. When people ask why I quit drinking, I usually dodge the question. "Oh, just decided to make some healthier choices," I say with a forced smile. It's easier that way. People tend to assume the worst. Maybe I hit rock bottom or had some dramatic intervention. But none of that is true. The real reason? I had a dream. Not just any dream. The dream. And it wasn't even bad. There was no scary, life or death epiphany. No tragic warning signs. Just this vivid, beautiful dream. So real that it changed my life the moment I woke up. It's weird even now, years later, how something as intangible as a dream could flip my entire world upside down. But it did. Before the dream, I was drinking pretty heavily. Nothing flashy, just a quiet, steady habit of 10 to 15 drinks a day. The thing is, no one ever noticed. I knew how to hide it. I'd have a couple beers with friends at happy hour, then sneak home and finish the rest by myself. I'd pour gin into Gatorade bottles or sip whiskey from a coffee mug. And every morning, I'd wake up, pop a few ibuprofen, and go about my day like everything was perfectly normal. The funny part is, I didn't even feel like I had a problem. Sure, my hands shook sometimes, and yeah, I felt like garbage most mornings, but who doesn't? Life was stressful. Drinking was just maintenance, a way to keep the edges of the world from feeling too sharp. I told myself it wasn't hurting anyone because no one knew. My friends thought I was just a casual drinker, 2 beers and done. My co-workers assumed I was one of those functioning people who had their life together. Even my family had no clue. And I liked it that way. But then came the dream. It was a simple scene. I was holding a baby. Not just holding her. I was her mother. And she was perfect. She had these big brown eyes, soft little fingers that curled around mine, and this tiny laugh that filled my whole heart. In the dream, I wasn't drunk or hungover or scrambling to keep it together. I was present. I felt this overwhelming, bone-deep sense of love. The kind that makes you want to protect someone with everything you have. It was more real than anything I'd ever experienced, like all the pieces of me that were usually scattered just clicked into place. I remember holding her against my chest, feeling her heartbeat, and thinking this is what I've been missing. And in that moment, I knew, this is the life I want. A life where I could be someone's everything. Then I woke up. It wasn't one of those dreams you forget as soon as you roll over. It lingered, clinging to me like a second skin. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, tears in my eyes, and knew something had to change. I walked into the bathroom, stared at my reflection in the mirror, and whispered, "No more." That night, Mother's Day, 2018, was the last time I touched alcohol. No weaning off, no slow fade, just done. Cold turkey. It wasn't even hard, which is the weirdest part. People always talk about withdrawal and cravings, but for me, it was like the dream wiped away all the noise in my head. The booze didn't tempt me anymore. I wanted that baby. I wanted the life I saw in that dream. And I knew, somehow, that drinking couldn't be part of that life. It just didn't fit. The first few weeks of sobriety were surreal. It wasn't the detox or the lifestyle shift that felt strange. It was the silence. For years, drinking had been my coping mechanism, my escape hatch. Now that it was gone, I felt exposed, vulnerable, like someone had stripped away the armor I'd been wearing and left me standing naked in the middle of a battlefield. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. I'd come home from work, sit on the couch, and stare at the wall for hours, trying to figure out how to fill the void. It wasn't just the absence of alcohol. It was the absence of who I'd been for so long. Without the drinks, I didn't know who I was anymore. But slowly, the pieces started to fall into place. I found new rituals, little things to replace the drinking. I started running in the mornings, even though I hated every minute of it. I took up baking, despite the fact that half my cookies came out burnt. And I signed up for a pottery class, which turned out to be a disaster, but at least it gave me something to do on Friday nights. The strangest part was not telling anyone. It felt too personal, too precious to share. How do you explain to someone that you quit drinking because of a dream? It sounds ridiculous, like some new age nonsense you'd read in a self-help book. So I kept it to myself. When friends asked why I wasn't drinking, I'd make up excuses, on a cleanse or taking a break. Eventually they stopped asking. And honestly, I kind of liked the secrecy. It was like carrying around a little treasure, a secret victory that no one could take away from me. But at the same time, it was lonely. Achieving something so huge, something that changed my entire life, and having no one to share it with, that part stung. I'd sit at parties, sipping water, and watch my friends clink their glasses, laughing and celebrating. And I'd think, if only you knew what I've accomplished. The dream stayed with me. Even now, years later, I can still feel that baby's tiny hand in mine. Still hear her laughter echoing in my heart. I don't know if I'll ever have kids in real life. Maybe the dream was just a glimpse of something I'll never get to experience. Or maybe it was a promise, something waiting for me down the line. Either way, the dream gave me something I never expected: clarity. It made me realize that I could want more for myself, that I could build a life that wasn't just about surviving from one drink to the next. It's not always easy. There are still nights when I feel the old urges creeping in, whispering that one drink won't hurt. But I hold on to the memory of that dream, and it pulls me through. Because the life I want, the one where I'm present, whole, and at peace, that life is worth fighting for. So yeah, that's the real reason I quit drinking. Not because of a rock-bottom moment or some dramatic wake-up call. Just a dream, a fleeting glimpse of the person I could be if I let go of the bottle. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Growing up, I thought horses were just big, friendly dogs with hooves. My cousin had a farm, and we'd go there every summer to ride. I thought I was a natural. After all, I'd been on a horse before. How hard could it be? Turns out there's a fine line between I know what I'm doing and I have no idea this animal is about to murder me. It all happened last year. My friend Sarah invited me to her family's ranch. She said, "You should come riding. It'll be fun like old times." Now, in retrospect, fun is not the word I'd use for what followed. I had ridden horses before, yes, but not often enough to be good at it. And certainly not enough to respect how dangerous they can be. The horse they saddled for me was named Diesel. I laughed when I heard that. What is he, a truck? Sarah just grinned. He's a big boy, but he's sweet. Don't worry. Diesel was massive. I swear this horse looked like he ate other horses for breakfast. But he had these big, soulful eyes, and when he nuzzled my arm, I thought, yeah, we're gonna get along just fine. What I didn't realize at the time was that those eyes, yeah, they were hiding pure chaos behind them. The first 20 minutes were smooth. Diesel trotted along the trail like a gentle giant, and I started to relax. I even got cocky, holding the reins in one hand, chatting with Sarah as if I was born to do this. Then we reached a clearing where the trail opened up. Sarah glanced at me with a mischievous grin. "Want to go a little faster?" she asked. "Faster? Sure, why not?" I gave Diesel the slightest nudge with my heels, and that was all it took. Diesel didn't trot. He didn't canter. He took off like a goddamn racehorse. 1 second I was upright, and the next I was clinging to his neck for dear life, screaming like a lunatic. The world blurred around me. Trees flying past, the wind roaring in my ears, the smell of dirt and horse sweat filling my nose. "Whoa! Whoa, Diesel!" I yelled, tugging on the reins, But Diesel? Diesel had zero intentions of slowing down. Now, let me explain something. Horses are not small animals. When 1,500 pounds of muscle and panic decide to bolt, there's not much you can do except hang on and pray. I bounced around in the saddle, my feet flopping out of the stirrups, clenching my thighs so hard I thought my legs might snap. Every bounce felt like a punch to my spine. Sarah shouted something behind me, but I couldn't hear her over the sound of my own internal screaming. The real problem started when Diesel spotted a rabbit on the trail. For reasons I will never understand, that rabbit sent Diesel into complete horse hysteria. He skidded sideways, rearing up like he was auditioning for a cowboy movie. And that's when I knew, I'm going to die. I'm going to get murdered by a horse named Diesel. Gravity decided to join the party, and I slid off the side of the saddle. Time slowed down as I felt myself falling, like one of those slow-motion scenes in a movie where the hero gets thrown off a building. Only I wasn't a hero. I was a dumbass in a helmet, about to eat dirt. I hit the ground hard, landing flat on my back. The air shot out of my lungs with a sound that can only be described as "unung guy." For a second, I just lay there, trying to remember how breathing worked. Diesel? He didn't even stop. He galloped a few more yards, snorted, and stared at me as if to say, "Oh, you're down? That's awkward." Sarah came rushing over, her horse trotting obediently like the well-behaved animal it was. "Are you okay?" she asked wide-eyed. "Yeah," I wheezed, even though my ribs felt like they'd been kicked by a football team. "I think so." Sarah dismounted and helped me sit up. That's when I realized my left arm wasn't working right. It dangled at a weird angle, and every time I moved, pain shot through my shoulder. "Oh no," Sarah muttered, eyes scanning my arm. "You might have dislocated it." "Perfect," I groaned. This is exactly how I wanted to spend my Saturday, crushed by a horse and broken like a piñata. Sarah tried to help me stand, but as soon as I put weight on my legs, my left knee buckled. Yeah, your knee doesn't look too good either," she said, grimacing. "Great," I muttered. So now, I'm a human pretzel. With Sarah's help, I hobbled back to the ranch, limping like an old man with one working limb. Diesel, meanwhile, was back in his pen, munching on hay like nothing had happened. I swear that horse gave me a smug look as I passed by, as if to say, "Next time, stay off my back, idiot." When we finally got to the house, Sarah's dad took one look at me and said, "Yup, that's a dislocated shoulder." He offered to pop it back in right there like it was some DIY project. "It's not as bad as it looks," he said with a grin. "Hurts like hell, though." I politely declined and decided to let a professional handle it. A few hours and an ER visit later, my shoulder was back in place, my knee was wrapped, and I had a prescription for painkillers. The doctor gave me a sympathetic look and said, "Next time, maybe stick to bicycles." "Yeah, thanks, doc." For the next 2 weeks, I couldn't lift my arm higher than my waist, and my knee was so swollen it looked like a grapefruit. I spent a lot of time on the couch, icing everything and reflecting on my life choices. And the lesson I learned? Horses are not pets. They're not giant dogs with hooves. They are 1,500 pounds of unpredictable muscle and attitude, and they will ruin your life if you give them half a chance. So now, whenever someone invites me horseback riding, I politely decline. "No thanks," I say. I prefer my hobbies to be non-lethal these days. And Diesel? Well, I'm sure he's still out there, living his best life, terrorizing the next unsuspecting fool who thinks riding a horse is just a fun, carefree activity. But not me. Never again. Because here's the thing. When a horse decides you're done, you're done. And next time, I might not get so lucky. It was supposed to be a quick trip, just a short drive through the back roads to get home before the storm hit. I'd driven that route 100 times before, winding through dense woods and old farmland, where the nearest gas station feels like a distant memory. But that night, everything went wrong. The first warning was the sky. The storm rolled in faster than I expected, thick black clouds swallowing the stars and moon. The air got heavy, humid, the way it does right before lightning tears the sky apart. By the time the first drops hit my windshield, I was still about 20 minutes from home. I figured I could outrun it. I was wrong. The rain started coming down in sheets, thick as a wall of water, the kind that makes it impossible to see even with the wipers going full speed. My headlights reflected off the rain, creating a dizzying blur. The road was empty. No other cars, no lights, nothing but the dark trees crowding the edges of the narrow pavement. Then the worst part, I lost cell service. My GPS glitched and froze, the little blue arrow spinning aimlessly as I tried to figure out where I was. I couldn't pull over. There was no shoulder, and the road had started to flood. If I stopped, I risked getting stuck. So, I kept driving. The rain was relentless, drumming on the roof like 100 tiny fists. Every gust of wind rocked the car, and the trees along the road groaned under the weight of it all. I clenched the wheel, white-knuckled, forcing myself to stay focused. But that's when I saw someone standing on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the rain, a weird shadow cast by my headlights. But as I got closer, I realized it was a person, an old man, soaked to the bone, standing perfectly still in the downpour. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and an old coat that hung off him like wet rags. His face was hidden beneath the brim, but something about the way he stood, so rigid and unnatural, sent a chill down my spine. I should have kept driving. I knew better, but something made me slow down. As I passed him, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and that's when I saw it. He turned, not just his head, but his entire body, pivoting smoothly as if on a hinge, following my car with that same eerie stillness. His face was still hidden, but I felt his gaze on me, sharp, cold, heavy, like fingers pressing against the back of my neck. Then, before I could think twice, the engine sputtered. "Not now," I muttered, tapping the gas pedal. The car coughed and lurched forward before the engine cut out completely. I coasted to a stop in the middle of the flooded road, rain hammering down, windshield wipers useless. The old man stood exactly where I'd left him, motionless, maybe 50 yards back. He hadn't moved an inch, but I knew he was watching me. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Just a clicking noise and silence. My heart was racing now, blood thudding in my ears. I locked the doors, though I wasn't sure why. It felt like locking a tent to keep out a bear. My phone was useless, still stuck in no-service purgatory. I glanced back at the rearview mirror, and my breath hitched. The man was gone. The stretch of road behind me was empty, just rain bouncing off the pavement. No sign of him anywhere. I scanned the trees, squinting through the downpour, but the darkness between the trunks seemed endless. Then I heard a soft tap, tap, tap on the window. I froze. The sound came from the passenger side, just out of my line of sight. Slowly, every muscle in my body screaming, I turned my head toward the window. There was nothing there, just water streaking down the glass, reflecting the headlights in strange, twisting patterns. For a moment, I thought maybe it was just a branch blown against the car by the wind. But then it tapped again. This time, it was deliberate, like knuckles rapping softly, politely, as if asking permission to come inside. I couldn't move. My brain was screaming drive, "Get out of here!" But my body wouldn't listen. I was paralyzed, heart thudding painfully in my chest. Then the voice came. "Let me in." It wasn't loud. It didn't shout or demand. It was calm, almost polite, but there was something behind the words. Something ancient and wrong, like a predator pretending to be friendly. I squeezed my eyes shut, hands trembling on the steering wheel. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. "Let me in," the voice repeated, closer this time. I don't know what possessed me to open my eyes, but when I did, I saw him. The old man was standing right outside the passenger window, hat dripping with rain, his face hidden in shadow. Only this time, I could see his hand, pale and withered, resting against the glass. His fingers were too long, too thin, like twigs wrapped in skin, and the way they pressed against the window, it wasn't a knock. It was a caress. I slammed my hand down on the lock button, even though the doors were already locked. The man tilted his head, as if amused. Then he leaned closer, his breath fogging up the glass, and whispered, "You've already let me in." The car plunged into darkness. The headlights flickered, then died completely. The rain vanished. The world went silent, like someone had pressed pause on reality. And then, I wasn't in the car anymore. I was standing in the middle of the road, rain pouring down my face, the car nowhere in sight. The old man was gone, the road empty as far as I could see. I stood there, drenched and shivering, trying to piece together what had just happened. When I finally found my way back to the car, parked exactly where I'd left it, the engine started on the first try. No clicking, no stalling. Just a smooth hum, as if nothing had ever been wrong. I drove home that night without looking back. It's been months since that night, but I still dream about it sometimes. In the dream, I'm sitting in the driver's seat, staring into the rain-soaked night, waiting. And every time, just before I wake up, I hear it again. You've already let me in. I haven't driven that road since. But some nights, when the storm rolls in and the power flickers, I feel him, sitting quietly in the passenger seat, waiting. There's a Spotify playlist my partner thinks I made just for him. I didn't, but for the past 3 years, I've let him believe that every song on it was handpicked to represent us. It's called Our Journey, and he plays it all the time. Like on road trips, at home when we cook dinner together, even during those lazy Sunday mornings when we stay in bed and scroll through our phones. It's become our soundtrack, this playlist that I didn't even make for him in the first place. I know what you're thinking. How hard can it be to tell someone, oops, wrong playlist? But it's not that simple, because the playlist was made with someone in mind, just not him. Let me explain. 3 years ago, I was fresh out of a long-term relationship. You know, one of those relationships where you're convinced that the person is the one, until they're not, and suddenly you're trying to figure out who you are without them. In the aftermath of the breakup, I did what every emotionally unhinged millennial does. I made a breakup playlist. Except mine wasn't about sadness. It was a remember how good things were before everything imploded kind of playlist. Songs that were tied to memories with my ex. The concerts we went to, the songs we belled out in the car, the tunes that played in the background while we danced in the kitchen. A little time capsule of everything we used to be. It was therapeutic in a way. I told myself I'd delete the playlist eventually, but I never did. I named it Our Journey. Yes, I know how cringe that sounds now, and forgot about it. Fast forward a few months later, and I meet my current boyfriend. Things clicked between us in a way I didn't think was possible after the breakup. He's funny, kind of little weird in all the right ways, and before I knew it, we were spending every weekend together, falling into a routine that felt so comfortable it scared me. One night, we were hanging out on my couch, wine glasses in hand, when he spotted my phone screen. "What's Our Journey?" he asked, scrolling through my Spotify app. I froze. It was like being caught with an emotional landmine. The smart thing to do would have been to tell the truth right then. Oh, it's just an old playlist. Not important. But instead, panic set in, and before I knew it, the words tumbled out. "Oh, that's our playlist." I don't know why I said it. Maybe it was the wine, or maybe some part of me thought it'd be easier to just repurpose the playlist than to explain the messy, emotional baggage attached to it. Either way, the damage was done. His face lit up. "Wow, you made us a playlist?" And then, just like that, Our Journey became ours. He hit play, and before I could stop him, the first song started, a live version of Yellow by Coldplay. My heart sank. That was the song my ex and I danced to at a wedding once. My boyfriend, however, thought it was beautiful. "This is perfect," he said, pulling me into a slow dance right there in the living room. And in that moment, I had two choices: stop the song and admit everything, or keep dancing and pretend the playlist was all for him. I chose to dance. At first it felt weird. Every time he'd play the playlist, I'd cringe internally, thinking about how each song was linked to someone else. But here's the thing. Over time, the song started taking on new meanings. The live version of Yellow wasn't just about that wedding anymore. It became the song we danced to on a random Tuesday night. The indie track I once associated with a road trip with my ex, it's now tied to the memory of us getting lost on a highway and laughing about it for hours. Little by little, the playlist stopped feeling like a relic of the past and started feeling like ours. I didn't even notice it happening at first, but somewhere along the way, my emotional attachment shifted. It wasn't about him versus my ex anymore. It was about us, who we were becoming, and the life we were building together. The funny thing is, he has no idea any of this is going on in my head. To him, Our Journey is just a sweet playlist his girlfriend made. He loves to analyze the lyrics, picking apart each song like it's some kind of hidden love letter. This one's about new beginnings, right? He'll say, referring to a song that, in my mind, used to be about the beginning of the wrong relationship. And I'll just smile and nod, thinking sure. New beginnings. Let's go with that. It's gotten to the point where even I can't tell what's real and what isn't anymore. Is this playlist really ours now? Or am I just convincing myself it is? Does it matter? All I know is when we drive with the windows down, blasting those songs with the summer wind in our hair, it feels right. Maybe the past doesn't matter as much as I thought it did. But then a couple of weeks ago, he did something that shook me to my core. We were sitting on the couch, and out of nowhere, he said, "Babe, I've been thinking, I want us to make a new playlist together. You know, one that's just about our memories. A fresh start." I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run away. He doesn't know it, but in that moment, he gave me the out I never thought I'd get. A chance to leave behind the playlist and all the emotional weight that came with it. So now, we're working on a new playlist. Every song we add is chosen together, with intention and meaning. And you know what? It feels good, like we're writing our own soundtrack from scratch, without any ghosts from the past lingering in the background. But here's the thing, I still haven't deleted Our Journey. I probably never will. It's still sitting there on my Spotify, untouched but not forgotten. A little reminder of how far I've come, and how love is a way of rewriting even the most complicated stories. Maybe one day, I'll tell him the truth. Maybe I won't. For now, I'm just happy we're writing our own song, one day at a time. And if Yellow comes on in the middle of a shuffle, well, that's just a coincidence. So it's Saturday morning, and I'm at the dog park with my furry partner in crime, Ollie. Now, Ollie is a 35-pound ball of unfiltered chaos. A rescue who can't decide if he's part greyhound, part raccoon, or part cat. All I know is that he's got endless energy, and the only way to maintain peace at home is to wear him out here every weekend. I've got my thermos of coffee, the autumn leaves are crisp underfoot, and I'm mentally preparing myself for the emotional warfare of trying to leave the park without Ollie throwing a tantrum. Now, here's the thing about dog parks. They're weird social spaces. You've got two kinds of people here. First, there are the dog-obsessed types who want to chat endlessly about grain-free kibble and canine yoga. Then, you've got the other half, people like me, who love their pets but aren't looking to make lifelong friendships with every human who happens to have a Labrador. Anyway, Ollie's running wild with some golden retriever, doing laps like his life depends on it, when I notice a guy standing nearby. Tall, wearing one of those hoodies that looks impossibly soft. He's throwing a ball for his dog, a fluffy, goofy-looking husky mix that, frankly, seems more interested in eating leaves than chasing anything. I give him a quick glance, mostly because Ollie's making his usual "I will steal your dogs and start a riot" face. The guy catches my eye and smiles, just a quick, friendly smile. I smile back because, well, social contract and all that. Now, here's where things could have gone south. A lot of guys think that because you're in the same space, whether it's a gym, coffee shop, or in this case, a dog park, you owe them a conversation. But this dude, he doesn't rush in. He just hangs back, watching his dog flop onto the ground with zero athletic ambition. Then Ollie, the little devil, decides that this is the perfect moment to swoop in, grab the husky's ball, and make a break for it. The guy laughs, not in an annoyed way, but genuinely amused. "Looks like I've got some competition," he says, nodding toward Ollie. I laugh too, because what else can you do when your dog is a certified troublemaker? "Yes, sorry about that. He's kind of a klepto." "No worries," he says, still grinning. "If anything, I should be thanking him. He's the only reason my lazy pup even moved today." Right off the bat, the vibe is relaxed. This is key. He's not trying to make it weird by forcing small talk out of nowhere. He's just rolling with what's happening in the moment. And that's the first lesson. If the universe hands you an opening, use it. But don't force one. There's a difference between seizing the moment and trying to manufacture one out of thin air. I bend down to grab Ollie's leash before he can escalate his ball theft operation, and the guy walks over, giving us some space but still close enough to talk without shouting. "I'm Nate, by the way," he says casually. "Jess," I reply. He points toward his husky, now dramatically sprawled on the grass like she just ran a marathon instead of... 5 steps. And that's Luna, or, as I like to call her, the laziest athlete in the world. I chuckle. She seems motivated, in a philosophical way. Yeah, she's more of a ponder the meaning of existence type. He tilts his head toward Ollie. Yours looks like he'd win gold in competitive theft, though. I grin. Ollie? Oh, absolutely. If stealing was an Olympic sport, we'd already have sponsors. And just like that, we're in a conversation. No awkward pauses, no weird questions about my relationship status. Just a natural back and forth that makes me want to keep talking. That's the trick, instead of diving in with. So, are you single? Or some equally cringeworthy question? Nate sticks to the topic at hand. Our dogs. Low pressure, easygoing, and honestly, a little fun. We end up chatting about the ridiculous quirks of our pets. How Luna once tried to steal a slice of pizza off a stranger's picnic blanket, and how Ollie has a bizarre obsession with socks. Every now and then, we pause to call our dogs back or break up a minor scuffle over toys, but the conversation just keeps flowing naturally. Now, I know what you're thinking. So what's the big deal? It's just a conversation about dogs. And you're right, but that's the point. Not every conversation with a stranger needs to feel like a mission to secure a date. Sometimes the best way to approach someone is just to talk. No ângulo, no agenda. Just two people sharing a moment. And if something more comes out of it, great. If not, no big deal. At one point, Ollie finally tires himself out, a miracle, and flops onto the grass, panting dramatically. I take a sip from my coffee, and Nate glances at me with a half smile. So, Jess, he says, hypothetically speaking, if someone were to suggest grabbing a coffee after this, would that be considered bribery or a legitimate offer? I smirk. Okay, that's smooth. It's playful without being pushy. He's testing the waters without diving head first into the deep end. Depends, I say, raising an eyebrow. Does the hypothetical coffee come with snacks? Obviously, he replies deadpan. I don't mess around when it comes to snacks. I laugh. And here's the thing. I feel comfortable. There's no pressure. If I said no, I have zero doubt that Nate would smile, say, fair enough, and go back to tossing a ball for his dog. And that right there? That's the sweet spot. The interaction feels light, respectful, and, most importantly, optional. Well, I say, after a beat. In that case, I think Ollie and I could be persuaded. Nate grins, pulls out his phone, and offers it to me. Here, put your number in, and we'll set it up. And just like that, it's easy. No awkward, so... Can I get your number? No weird pressure to exchange info on the spot. Just a casual, mutual exchange that feels nice. So, what's the moral of this story? It's pretty simple, really. Keep it light, read the moment, and for the love of everything, don't be weird about it. If Nate had come in too strong, hovering, asking invasive questions, or trying to make it about more than the moment, I would have shut down faster than Ollie when I say the word bath. But because he kept things easy and playful, the interaction felt natural. Approaching someone isn't about nailing the perfect line or impressing them with some grand gesture. It's about creating a moment where both people feel comfortable enough to engage, without pressure, without expectation, and definitely without weird vibes. And if the person isn't interested, that's fine. Smile, wish them well, and move on. There are plenty of other moments waiting out there, and plenty of dogs who'd love to steal your ball. If I had known a stupid meme would blow up my relationship, I never would have checked his group chat that night. But curiosity is a sneaky little thing, isn't it? It gets under your skin, makes you itch, and before you know it, you're scratching at something you shouldn't. It all started on a lazy Sunday afternoon. Ryan was in the shower, and his phone buzzed next to me on the couch. No big deal, right? Just a message notification. We were the kind of couple who never made a fuss about checking each other's phones. If I needed to borrow his for music, no problem. If he wanted to use mine for Google Maps, go ahead. No secrets. Or at least, that's what I thought. The message was from the boys, his group chat with his old college friends. Usually harmless stuff. Memes, weekend plans, sports banter. I wasn't snooping, just killing time until he came out of the bathroom. But this time, when I clicked the notification, it opened to a photo that made my stomach lurch. A picture of Ryan. My Ryan. Arms wrapped around a girl I didn't know, both of them laughing under soft, dim lighting. For a moment, I stared at the screen, my brain struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this an old picture? A coworker, maybe? But Ryan didn't talk about any close female friends. And the way his hand rested on her hip, it wasn't friendly. It was intimate. Familiar. The caption below the picture said it all. Caught you, bro, face with tears of joy. The message beneath it hit even harder. Hope Ashley doesn't see this. My hands trembled as I scrolled up. I shouldn't have kept looking, but I couldn't stop myself. There were more photos, different angles, same girl. And then came the text. Damn, you two look cozy. Does she know? And Ryan's response, the one that shattered everything. Nah, it's cool. Ashley thinks I'm with Sean. I could hear the water still running in the shower, each drop taunting me with the lie I was living. I sat frozen, clutching his phone in disbelief. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat screaming. What the hell is happening? How long had this been going on? Who is she? And more importantly, how could I have been so blind? For a split second, I considered throwing his phone across the room, shattering it against the wall the way he had just shattered my trust. But I took a deep breath and forced myself to stay calm. If I confronted him now, mid-shower, it would be nothing but chaos. I needed more. I needed the whole story. So, I kept scrolling. The deeper I went, the uglier it got. The texts weren't just from that night. They stretched back for months. There were inside jokes I didn't understand, references to secret meetups, and even a thread about a weekend trip I thought Ryan had taken with his brother. Turns out, he hadn't gone with his brother at all. My stomach churned as I read the most recent exchange. She thinks I'm working late, so I'm good for Friday. See you then, babe, winking face dot. Babe. He was calling her babe. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. This wasn't just a fling. This was a double life. A carefully curated web of lies, woven with just enough truth to keep me from asking questions. And the worst part? I never even saw it coming. Ryan came out of the bathroom a few minutes later, towel slung around his waist, water dripping from his hair. He smiled at me, like nothing had happened, like he hadn't just been exposed for the liar he was. Hey babe, he said casually, running a hand through his wet hair. What's for dinner? For a moment, I just stared at him, my chest tight with a mix of anger and heartbreak. He looked so normal, so Ryan. How do people do that? How do they act like everything's fine when they know they're ripping someone apart inside? I held up his phone. Your group chat's interesting. The color drained from his face. In an instant, his relaxed posture stiffened, his eyes darting toward the screen. Ashley. No. I cut him off, my voice cold and steady. Don't even try. He stood there, frozen, searching for the right thing to say. But there were no right words, no explanations that could fix what I had just seen. I could see the panic in his eyes, the way his brain scrambled for an excuse, a way out. Let me explain, he started, but I shook my head. Explain what? That you've been lying to me for months? That you've been sneaking around with her while telling me you're with Sean? My voice cracked, but I kept going, the anger bubbling to the surface. Do you even know how humiliating this is? Your friends knew. They were laughing about it. Laughing at me. Ryan opened his mouth to speak, but I wasn't done. How long, Ryan? How long have you been lying to me? He looked down, the guilt written all over his face. It wasn't. I didn't mean for it to happen. Yeah, I snapped. Well, it did. There was my moment of clarity. All the confusion, the hurt, the betrayal. It crystallized into one simple truth. I deserved better. I had spent so much time loving him, trusting him, building a future with him. And for what? So he could play me for a fool? I stood up, my hands trembling, but my resolve solid. I'm done, Ryan. We're done. His eyes widened in disbelief. Wait, Ashley, please. No, I said firmly. I'm not doing this. He reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't. Just don't. I grabbed my keys and my jacket, my heart pounding with the weight of the decision I had just made. It wasn't easy. It hurt like hell. But staying? That would have hurt even more. Ryan stood there, helpless, as I walked out the door. Out of his life, out of the lies, out of the mess he had created. And as I drove away, tears streaming down my face, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Freedom. Because sometimes the hardest thing you can do is leave. But once you do, that's when you realize just how strong you really are. In the weeks that followed, Ryan tried reaching out, texts, calls, even emails. But I ignored every single one. I blocked him on everything, wiped his existence from my world like a smudge on a window. And each day that passed, I felt a little lighter. One day, Sean, his so-called alibi, reached out to apologize. He claimed he didn't know how deep it went, that he never meant to hurt me. I told him the same thing I told Ryan. I don't care anymore. Because the truth is, some people aren't worth the fight. Some people aren't worth the tears. And the best thing you can do, the only thing, is walk away. And that, my friends, is how I learned the hard way that trust isn't just given. It's earned. And once it's broken, there's no going back. I used to work the night shift at a 24-hour gas station just off the highway. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it paid the bills. Most nights were boring. Just a handful of truckers coming through, the occasional college kid looking for snacks, and a lot of dead silence. I had a routine: restock the shelves, clean the coffee machines, and scroll through my phone between customers. Easy enough. That night, it was unusually quiet. No cars, no customers, just the hum of the overhead lights and the faint buzz of the old refrigerator in the corner. Around 2 a.m., the place felt off. It's hard to explain, but the air felt heavier, like something unseen was pressing down on me. The fluorescent lights flickered every now and then, casting quick, unsettling shadows across the empty store. I try to shake the feeling off. Night shifts mess with your head sometimes. It's easy to get paranoid when it's just you and the darkness outside. But then the bell above the front door chimed. A man walked in. At first glance, he looked normal. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Average height, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans, with a baseball cap pulled low over his face. Nothing unusual, just another guy stopping in during a long drive. But the way he moved was strange, too slow, too deliberate. He didn't say anything as he made his way to the back of the store, toward the drink coolers. I kept an eye on him, my instincts kicking in. Something about him put me on edge, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. He stood there for a long time, just staring at the rows of soda bottles, not moving. I shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, glancing at the clock. It felt like hours passed, but it had only been a couple of minutes. Finally, he grabbed a bottle of water and made his way to the counter. I gave him a polite nod. "How's it going?" I asked, trying to keep things casual. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his face hidden under the shadow of his cap. His hand hovered over the counter for a moment, as if he was debating whether to put the bottle down or not. And then he smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, like someone stretching their face into a shape it wasn't meant to make. His teeth were small, almost too perfect, and the corners of his mouth pulled back unnaturally far. It wasn't just a smile, it was a silent threat. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "That'll be $2.50, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. He didn't respond. He just kept smiling, staring at me with this unsettling intensity. Then he leaned in, so close I could smell the faint scent of damp clothes and something metallic, like rust. "You shouldn't be here," he whispered. I blinked, my heart skipping a beat. "What?" He didn't repeat himself. Instead, he set the bottle down on the counter, still smiling that grotesque smile, and slowly backed away, step by step, until he was out of the door. The bell chimed again as the door swung shut behind him. I watched as he disappeared into the darkness beyond the gas station's lights. And then I noticed something. The bottle of water on the counter. It was empty. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the bottle, turning it over in my hands. It was sealed, but there wasn't a single drop of water inside. It made no sense. How could an unopened bottle be completely empty? I felt the hairs on the back of my neck rise, and that heavy feeling returned, pressing down on me harder than before. I glanced out the windows, scanning the parking lot for any sign of the man, but there was no one there. Just the quiet hum of the street lights and the dark expanse of the highway beyond. I told myself it was nothing, just some weirdo passing through, maybe trying to mess with me. but the unease wouldn't leave. Then, around 3 a.m., the phone rang. Now, the gas station phone almost never rings, especially not in the middle of the night. My hands were trembling as I picked it up. "Hello?" There was a long pause on the other end. Then a whisper, "You shouldn't be there." My heart slammed against my ribcage. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice cracking. The line went dead. I slammed the phone down, my pulse racing. I tried to tell myself it was a prank, just someone messing with me. But deep down, I knew better. Something wasn't right. The rest of the shift crawled by in agonizing silence. Every creak of the building, every flicker of the lights, sent my nerves on edge. I kept glancing at the parking lot, half expecting that man to return, but he never did. Finally, at 6 a.m., my replacement showed up. I practically ran out of the store, eager to get home and forget about the whole thing. But it didn't end there. The next night, I got a text from my coworker, just one sentence. "Who was that guy you let in last night?" I stared at the message, my blood running cold. I texted back, "What guy?" He replied almost instantly, "The one on the cameras." I felt my heart skip a beat. I hadn't checked the security cameras before I left that morning. I just wanted to get the hell out of there. Another text came through, this time with an image attached. It was a screenshot from the camera above the counter, showing me standing there, talking to the man in the hoodie. But the timestamp was wrong. It said 12:15 a.m. I didn't start my shift until 1 a.m. And the man wasn't smiling in the photo. He was staring straight at the camera, his face completely expressionless. And behind him, barely visible in the corner of the frame, was another figure, tall, gaunt, and wearing the same gray hoodie. I never went back to that gas station. And to this day, I still wonder, who or what was I talking to that night? Senior year drama club productions are usually a snooze fest. Think Shakespeare with kids who forget their lines, or some musical no one's ever heard of like Pirates of Penzance. This year was supposed to be no different. Our drama teacher, Mr. Langford, picked A Midsummer Night's Dream because, in his words, it's whimsical and fun, which loosely translated meant boring and confusing. But that was before Jake. Yes, Jake again, decided the play needed a little something extra. "We gotta make it memorable," Jake said, slapping the playbill on the cafeteria table with a mischievous grin. Like legendary. I knew that grin. Nothing good ever followed that grin. "What do you mean?" I asked, already regretting the question. "I'm talking surprise performance. Think flash mob, but with chaos." Jake's plan, as he explained it with way too much enthusiasm, was to hijack the second act of the play with our own version. An improvised, absurd disaster featuring fake sword fights, costume changes, and pyrotechnics, sort of. Now, any normal person would have said, "No way." But this was senior year. We were bored, reckless, and had nothing left to lose. So, naturally, we said, "When do we start?" We met every day after school in the empty band room, plotting and practicing. Jake insisted that we learn stage combat, which basically involved us slapping each other with plastic swords from the toy aisle. Dave volunteered to play an undercover fairy, and someone else offered to sneak in a smoke machine from the Halloween store. We even made costumes out of random gym clothes, including a toga made from someone's PE shorts. We kept everything under wraps. Nobody, not even the real cast, knew what we were planning. It was all about timing. We'd wait for the most dramatic moment, right in the middle of Act 2, and then burst onto the stage like lunatics. Jake called it enhancing the narrative. I called it a bad idea, but by then, it was too late to back out. The auditorium was packed. Parents, teachers, students. They were all there, waiting for what they thought would be a classy night of theater. Mr. Langford paced nervously backstage, muttering about lighting cues and hoping nobody would forget their lines. He had no idea what was coming. The play started normally enough. Some kid named Brian was delivering Shakespearean lines like he was half asleep, and the audience was politely pretending to care. But halfway through Act 2, just when things were getting tense, Jake gave the signal, a quick thumbs up from the side of the stage. It was go time. Suddenly, the doors at the back of the auditorium burst open, and Jake came charging down the aisle, dressed as a Roman gladiator. "Hark!" he shouted, waving a plastic sword above his head. I come bearing news of great importance. The entire audience froze in stunned silence. On stage, the actor stood dumbfounded, staring at Jake like he was an alien who'd crash-landed in the middle of their scene. Mr. Langford, somewhere off stage, let out a horrified gasp. Jake leapt onto the stage, narrowly avoiding a tangle of curtains. "Thy plot is weak," he bellowed, pointing dramatically at the lead actor. "I offer you a challenge." And then, as rehearsed, the rest of us stormed the stage. Dave somersaulted out from behind the curtains, wearing fairy wings and shooting glitter from a dollar store party popper. Someone cranked the Halloween smoke machine to full blast, filling the entire stage with a thick, choking fog. Two other guys began an impromptu sword fight with inflatable pool noodles, while Jake shouted things like, "Thy honor shall be avenged." The audience was in complete shock. Some people were laughing. Others looked genuinely concerned. One lady in the front row clutched her pearls like we were reenacting Mad Max instead of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And then came the fireworks, or at least what we thought were fireworks. See, the original plan was to use sparklers during our big finale. But Jake, ever the visionary, thought that wasn't epic enough. So he bought a pack of those little firework fountains, the kind that shoots sparks straight into the air. Now, if you've never lit fireworks indoors, let me give you some advice. Don't. The first one went off with a sputter of sparks, which was cool for about 2 seconds. But then the sparks caught on the edge of the curtain, which instantly began smoldering. Before we knew what was happening, the fire alarm started blaring, and the sprinklers kicked in, drenching the entire stage in a cold downpour. The actor screamed. The audience screamed. Mr. Langford? He collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest like he was having an existential crisis. Meanwhile, Jake, who, by the way, was soaked and still holding his plastic sword, just grinned like he'd won the lottery. "This," Jake shouted over the chaos, "I asked the greatest night of my life." The sprinklers ran for 10 full minutes before someone managed to shut them off. By then, the stage was a swamp, the audience was soaked, and the cast was standing there, dazed and shivering in their Elizabethan costumes. The principal arrived shortly after, looking furious and holding a bullhorn. "Everyone out," she bellowed, her voice echoing through the soggy auditorium. "Show's over." We were rounded up like criminals and marched to the principal's office, still dripping wet and covered in glitter. Mr. Langford didn't say a word the entire time, just sat there, staring at the floor like he'd aged 10 years in the span of an hour. Jake was grinning ear to ear. "Totally worth it," he whispered to me as we waited for our parents to arrive. "We made history tonight. We were suspended for a week. Jake got 2 weeks because the school discovered the fireworks were technically illegal. Mr. Langford took an extended leave of absence to rest and recover. We suspect he's still in therapy. The real tragedy, though, was that A Midsummer Night's Dream was canceled indefinitely, meaning the drama club never got to perform their final act. But you know what? Nobody cared. To this day, when people talk about that year's school play, they don't mention Shakespeare or missed lines. They talk about us. The night a bunch of bored seniors hijacked the stage, lit fireworks indoors, and turned a soggy disaster into an unforgettable piece of high school history. Every reunion, we laugh about it. Even the former drama kids admit it was the most exciting thing that ever happened to them. And Jake, he swears it was the pinnacle of his life. Honestly, he says every time the story comes up, they should have given me a standing ovation. And you know what? He's not wrong. This story haunts me to this day, and not just because of what happened, but because I have to see the people involved at every single family barbecue. Let me explain. When I was 22, I was crashing with my buddy Jordan for a few months. I'd just gotten out of a rough relationship, lost my apartment, and Jordan, being the great friend that he was, let me stay in the spare bedroom of his dad's place until I got back on my feet. Now, Jordan's dad, Rick, was an interesting guy. He had that former high school football star who never let it go vibe. Still hit the gym every day, drove a sports car that was way too loud, and wore sunglasses indoors because, cool guy stuff. Rick also had a girlfriend, Steph, who was about half his age. She couldn't have been more than 30, blonde, bubbly, and always dressed like she was ready to hit a beach party. She was one of those people who called everyone hon, and gave unsolicited shoulder massages. You know the type. At first, I didn't think much of her. She seemed nice enough, and I figured she was just along for Rick's money and free vacations. But as the weeks went by, I started noticing little things. The way she'd linger in the doorway when I was watching TV. The way she'd laugh just a little too hard at my dumb jokes. And the way her hand would casually brush against mine when she passed by. It was subtle at first, just harmless flirting, or at least, that's what I told myself. I mean, she was dating Rick, and I was living under his roof. There were rules, right? Well, about those rules. It happened one weekend when Jordan was out of town visiting his girlfriend, and Rick had taken off for some business trip. That left me and Steph alone in the house for 2 whole days. I told myself I'd stay out of her way, keep things cool, no drama, no complications. Easy, right? Wrong. It started on Saturday night. I was in the kitchen making some ramen, and Steph came in wearing this tiny tank top and those shorts that are so small you wonder why they even bothered. She leaned against the counter, twirling a wine glass in her hand, and gave me a playful smile. "Lonely night?" she asked, her voice low and sweet. Yeah, just laying low." She tilted her head, giving me this look that made my stomach flip. "You know, I've always thought you were kind of cute." I laughed it off, trying to steer the conversation back into safe territory. Thanks, I guess." But Steph wasn't letting me off the hook that easy. She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something citrusy and dangerous. "You don't have to be shy, hun. It's just you and me tonight." My brain was screaming at me to run, to politely excuse myself and lock the door to my room. But Steph reached out, running her fingers down my arm, and suddenly my feet didn't seem to be working. "This is a bad idea," I whispered, half to her, half to myself. "Probably," she whispered back, grinning. And just like that, the thin thread of common sense snapped. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were in Rick's bedroom because apparently I like to live dangerously. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything over the blood rushing in my ears. It felt surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body, thinking, this can't be happening. This shouldn't be happening. But it was. The whole time, the voice in the back of my head kept saying, "Rick is going to kill you. And Jordan? He's going to bury your body in the woods." But I didn't stop. I couldn't. The morning after was pure panic. I woke up tangled in Rick's sheets, my clothes scattered across the floor, and Steph sleeping peacefully beside me. For a split second, I thought about sneaking out and pretending it never happened. But as I tried to quietly grab my jeans, Steph stirred. "Leaving already?" she murmured, half awake. I froze. Yeah, just gonna head back to my room." She smiled lazily, like what we'd done was no big deal. "Relax, hun. It's our little secret, right? A secret. A secret that would inevitably blow up in my face." I thought that was the end of it. I figured we'd both pretend it never happened and move on with our lives. But Steph had other ideas. Over the next few days, she started texting me. Playful at first, then bolder. "Had fun the other night, winky face, and can't stop thinking about you." Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted into knots. I knew I needed to shut it down, but part of me, most of me didn't want to. It was thrilling and dangerous and stupid in all the best and worst ways. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Rick came home early. I was in the living room scrolling through Netflix when the front door swung open. "Hey buddy, I'm back," Rick called out, dropping his suitcase by the door. Steph walked in from the kitchen, her face the perfect picture of innocence. "Bubba, I missed you." She gave him a hug and a kiss, like she hadn't just spent the weekend in bed with me. I sat there, frozen on the couch, trying not to look guilty as hell. Rick grinned at me. "Thanks for keeping an eye on Steph while I was gone." Yeah, no problem." I thought I was in the clear. I really did. But then later that night, Steph sent me one last text. "Miss me already?" And that's when I knew I was officially in over my head. To this day, Rick and Jordan have no idea what happened. Steph eventually stopped texting me. Thank God, but I still see them at family barbecues and holiday gatherings. Every time Rick offers me a beer or Jordan cracks a joke, I feel like I'm standing on a minefield just waiting for it to blow. It's been years, but the guilt still lingers. And every now and then, I catch Steph looking at me from across the room, that same mischievous smile on her face. Some secrets I've learned don't stay buried. They just lurk beneath the surface, waiting to resurface at the worst possible moment. The first time my heart skipped a beat, I thought it was nothing. Maybe too much coffee, maybe stress from work. I shrugged it off like most people do when their body sends a little warning sign. But then it happened again. Just a faint flutter, like my heart was tripping over its own rhythm. It felt weird, but not terrifying. Just strange. Then came the exhaustion. Not the normal kind you get after a long day. This was bone deep. The kind of tired that makes it feel like your body is made of lead, like every movement takes twice as much effort as it should. I started getting winded just from climbing the stairs to my apartment. I catch myself leaning against walls, pretending to stretch, when really I just needed a break. I told myself it was just a phase. I'd been through stressful times before, work deadlines, late nights, skipped meals. It would pass, right? Except it didn't. The thing is, I didn't tell anyone, not even my partner. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding like I was being dramatic. It's one thing to complain about feeling tired or needing more sleep, but saying, hey, I think something's really wrong with my heart felt heavier. Like the words themselves would make it real. And the last thing I wanted was to watch the people I care about start to worry. So I kept it to myself. I started rationing my energy throughout the day, planning my activities carefully so I could avoid situations where someone might notice me struggling. I'd fake phone calls to get out of group hikes, claim I had early meetings to dodge morning gym sessions, and politely decline invitations that required any kind of physical exertion. It was easier that way. If no one knew, then I could pretend it wasn't happening. About a month in, the heart palpitations became more frequent. There were moments when I'd feel this awful squeezing sensation in my chest, like someone had wrapped a fist around my heart and wouldn't let go. It wasn't exactly painful, just wrong, like my body was trying to tell me something, but I refused to listen. One night, I woke up gasping for breath, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my ribcage. I sat up in bed, clutching my chest, convinced I was about to die right there in the dark with no one but the cat to witness it. But after a few minutes, the pounding slowed and I could breathe again. My partner stirred beside me. "You okay?" she mumbled, half asleep. "Yeah," I whispered, forcing a smile she couldn't see. "Just a weird dream. Go back to sleep." And that was that. Crisis averted. Lie maintained. Eventually, I made an appointment at urgent care. I told the nurse about the palpitations, the fatigue, the breathlessness. She checked my blood pressure, listened to my heart, and said, "You should see a cardiologist soon." Her words hit me harder than I expected. It was one thing to feel like something was wrong. It was another thing entirely to have a medical professional confirm it. But even then, I didn't tell anyone. Not my partner, not my family, not my friends. I booked the cardiologist appointment in secret and went about my life as if nothing had changed. I thought, why worry them before I know for sure? I could handle this on my own. I didn't need to burden anyone else with my fears. The cardiologist appointment was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, the symptoms got worse. I started carrying aspirin in my pocket, just in case. Every time my heart skipped a beat or I felt that crushing weight in my chest, I'd pop a pill and tell myself it was fine. Just a precaution. But deep down, I knew I was fooling myself. There were moments, quiet ones when no one else was around, where the fear would sneak up on me. I'd catch myself imagining worst-case scenarios. Collapsing at work, being rushed to the ER, my partner standing over me, asking why I never said anything. But I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Then came the night, everything almost unraveled. We were at a friend's birthday party, and I could already tell my energy was running low. But I plastered on a smile, sipped my water, and nodded along to conversations as if everything was fine. At one point, my partner gave me a worried look. "You okay? You look pale." "Yeah," I said, forcing a laugh. "Just tired. You know how work's been." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. Later that night, as the group headed outside for drinks around the fire pit, I knew I had to bail. My chest felt tight, and my legs were starting to wobble. I faked a phone call, told my partner I had to step away for a minute, and slipped out to the car. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, breathing through the dizziness. "Just a few minutes," I told myself. "Just rest a little, and you'll be fine." But the truth was, I wasn't fine. I hadn't been fine for a long time. The cardiologist appointment finally rolled around, and I went alone. The waiting room was filled with people older than me. White hair, canes, wheelchairs. I felt like an intruder sitting there in my 30s, waiting to be told whether or not my heart was giving out. The doctor ran some tests, took my history, and told me I was showing early signs of heart failure. It wasn't a death sentence, not yet at least, but it was serious. Manageable with medication, sure. But long-term, I need to make some major changes. Do you have a good support system? The doctor asked gently, as if she could see the walls I'd built around myself. Yeah, elite. Great support system. When I got home that night, my partner was waiting for me on the couch. Where were you? She asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I opened my mouth to tell her the truth, to finally say the words I'd been holding in for months. But instead, I shrugged and said, just ran some errands. She gave me a look, the kind that says, I know you're lying, but I won't push. And I hated myself for it. It's been 2 months since the diagnosis, and I still haven't told anyone. Not my partner, not my family, not my closest friends. I carry the secret around like a second heartbeat, thudding quietly beneath the surface, reminding me that time is running out. Every skipped beat, every moment of breathlessness is a reminder that I can't keep this up forever. But for now, I'll keep pretending. I'll keep showing up, smiling, and saying, I'm fine, because the thought of seeing pity in their eyes is worse than the fear itself. And maybe, just maybe, I'll tell them when I'm ready, but not today. So, this story is probably the dumbest near-death experience you'll ever hear, but it's 100% true. You know how people joke about death by embarrassing things? Like slipping on a banana peel or tripping over your own shoelaces? Well, let me tell you, death by sandwich is not as funny when it's happening to you. It started on a regular Tuesday. I had skipped breakfast, mistake number 1. So by lunchtime, I was starving. I mean the kind of hunger where even the questionable leftovers in the back of the fridge start looking like gourmet meals. I decided to treat myself to something decent. None of that sad microwave meal nonsense. I headed to a deli down the street that makes these massive sandwiches. We're talking the kind of sandwich that's more of a structural engineering project than food. I ordered a turkey club. Nothing fancy, just bread, turkey, bacon, lettuce, tomato, and some chipotle mayo. But here's the kicker. This thing was stacked about 5 inches high. It was like the chef was trying to see how much food he could cram between 2 slices of bread without getting sued. It came with a little toothpick through the top to keep it from collapsing, which should have been my first warning. Anyway, I got back to the office, sat at my desk, and unwrapped my sandwich like it was Christmas morning. I could feel my stomach growling. I was ready, so ready. And because I was starving, I didn't bother with any small, polite bites. No, I went full anaconda, opened my mouth as wide as it would go, and took the biggest bite possible. That was mistake number 2. The moment I bit down, I knew something was wrong. The bread was way denser than I expected, thick and chewy like trying to gnaw through a yoga mat. And to make things worse, I had jammed half the sandwich in my mouth at once like some kind of food-obsessed lunatic. But I was already committed. I couldn't just spit it out. No one wants to be that person, right? So I tried to chew, and chew, and chew. But the bread was absorbing every drop of saliva I had like a sponge. My mouth felt drier than the Sahara. I figured I just needed to power through. I tried to swallow. That was mistake number 3. The lump of food hit the back of my throat like a brick, and suddenly, nothing. It wasn't going down. It wasn't coming back up. It was just stuck. At first I thought, no big deal. I'll just cough it out. I gave a little cough and nothing happened. So I tried again, harder this time. Still nothing. That's when the panic hit me like a freight train. I couldn't breathe. I reached for my water bottle, fumbling to unscrew the cap with shaky hands, and took a swig, hoping the water would wash the food down. Instead, the water just sat there, sloshing uselessly in my throat because the sandwich was blocking my airway like a cork in a wine bottle. I tried to cough again. Nothing. I was starting to feel lightheaded, and that's when it really hit me. Holy shit. I'm about to die from a sandwich. My vision started to narrow, and I could feel that awful, instinctual wave of panic rising. It's the kind of panic you can't think your way out of, the one that makes every muscle in your body scream, "Do something now." I jumped up from my desk, knocking over my chair, and stumbled into the hallway. I tried to wave at my co-worker Greg, who was standing by the coffee machine, blissfully unaware that I was moments away from becoming the dumbest obituary of the decade. I opened my mouth to say something, maybe help or sandwich, but all that came out was this horrifying wheeze, like a dying accordion. Greg turned and stared at me, his face shifting from confusion to panic in about 2 seconds flat. "Dude, are you okay?" I shook my head violently, clutching my throat, trying to mime, "No, Greg, I am very much not okay. I am literally dying from lunch." To his credit, Greg sprang into action. "Heimlich maneuver," he shouted, though there was no one else in the hallway except us. He ran over, spun me around like I was a rag doll, and wrapped his arms around my waist. Now let me tell you, Greg is a lot of things, but gentle isn't one of them. He gave me the most aggressive Heimlich thrust I have ever experienced. It felt like he was trying to squeeze the life out of me to save my life. I swear, my ribs popped like bubble wrap. The first thrust did nothing except force a sad little squeak out of me. The second one was a direct hit. I felt the sandwich dislodge from my throat and fly out of my mouth like a missile. And here's the best part. Greg wasn't just trying to save me. He was aiming. The soggy chunk of bread, turkey, and bacon sailed through the air and landed right in the middle of the coffee machine drip tray with a wet splat. We both stood there for a moment, stunned, breathing heavily. Me because I could finally breathe again, and Greg because he had just saved someone's life with the force of a linebacker. "You okay?" Greg asked, still holding me by the waist like I might keel over at any second. I nodded, gasping for air and clutching my ribs. "Yeah," I croaked, "but I think you broke my spine." He laughed, like this was the funniest thing that had ever happened to him. Meanwhile, I was standing there, hands on my knees, wondering how the hell I had come so close to being taken out by deli meat. I spent the rest of the day sitting very still at my desk, sipping water and contemplating my life choices. I never finished that sandwich. In fact, I didn't eat another sandwich for weeks. But here's the thing. Choking happens fast. 1 second, you're enjoying your meal, and the next, you're teetering on the edge of the abyss. And it doesn't take much, just one poorly timed bite or a moment of carelessness. That's all it takes to turn lunch into your last meal. These days, I take my time when I eat. Small bites, lots of chewing, and zero shame if I have to spit something out. Because let me tell you, no sandwich is worth dying for. And every time I see Greg at the coffee machine, I give him a little nod of gratitude. Because thanks to him, I'm still here, alive, breathing, and forever humbled by the fact that my closest brush with death was caused by turkey on rye. The plan was simple. One night to try it out, see if I could handle it, and maybe, just maybe, pay off half my overdue credit card. One night, no strings attached, then back to my boring life working part-time at a smoothie bar. But if life has taught me anything, it's that no plan survives contact with reality. And reality, as I quickly learned, has a wicked sense of humor. I arrived at the club with my heart pounding hard enough to make my ribs ache. The neon sign outside flickered like something out of a bad movie, the Diamond Denver. The bouncer, a hulking guy with a shaved head, barely glanced at me as he opened the door. "First night," he grunted. "Yeah." He gave me a look, a mixture of pity and amusement, and chuckled. "Good luck, kid." Inside, the club was dimly lit with cheap red lighting, and the air smelled like stale perfume and spilled beer. A techno beat thudded in the background, and somewhere on stage, a woman in silver boots spun around a pole like she was born holding it. I swallowed hard. A dancer named Roxy, chewing gum like it was the only thing keeping her alive, sauntered over to me in the dressing room. "You the new girl?" I nodded, feeling painfully out of place in my lace bralette and fishnet stockings. "Cute," she said with a smirk. "Okay, here's the deal. Don't take drinks from customers unless you pour it yourself. And don't fall for the bachelor parties. They're the worst. Oh, and whatever happens on stage, don't stop dancing." Her words were more ominous than comforting. "Got it," I muttered, hoping I didn't look as terrified as I felt. Roxy popped a bubble and grinned. "Don't sweat it. If you mess up, just flip your hair and pretend you meant to." That's what we all do. The DJ announced my stage name, Luna. Not sure why I picked it, but it sounded mysterious in my head. Now it just felt embarrassing. The spotlight hit the stage, and the crowd cheered half-heartedly as I stepped up in my ridiculously high heels. The song was some slow, bass-heavy track I'd never heard before, and the pole was cold against my hand. I tried to remember everything I'd Googled about pole dancing: graceful spins, fluid movements, seductive poses. But all that knowledge vanished the second I stepped onto that stage. I went a twirl, and wham, I slipped, landed flat on my ass. The crowd roared with laughter, and I wanted to disappear. I could feel my face heating up as I scrambled to my feet, panicking. This was it. I was going to be known as the girl who wiped out on her first night. But then, out of nowhere, some guy at the front shouted, "WOO, now that's a show." The crowd cheered louder, and suddenly, the fear melted into something else, something unexpected. I started to laugh, and then, to my own surprise, I kept dancing. Once the initial shock wore off, the rest of the stage set wasn't half bad. Sure, I wasn't a pole dancing goddess, but I managed not to fall again, and by the time the song ended, I felt weirdly okay. Not amazing, not terrible, just okay. I stepped off the stage, my legs trembling, but my heart lighter. Roxy gave me a slow clap from across the room. "See? Told ya. Flip your hair and keep going." "Does it get easier?" I asked, still catching my breath. She shrugged. "No, but it gets funnier." Things took a turn in the VIP room. I'd barely caught my breath before the manager, a wiry guy named Vic, told me I had a private dance request. "Room 3, he said. "Bachelor party. Good luck." I bit my lip. Bachelor party? Roxy's warning flashed in my head, but I had no choice. Rent wasn't going to pay itself, and a bachelor party meant bigger tips if I could survive it. I pushed open the door to room 3 and found myself face to face with a group of guys already 3 drinks past tipsy. They hollered when they saw me, waving dollar bills like they were front row fans at a rock concert. "Oh, hell yeah, it's Luna," one of them slurred. The groom, a wiry guy in a too-tight button-down, grinned at me like he'd just won the lottery. "We're gonna make it rain, baby." I forced a smile, reminding myself, smile. Say yes. Don't judge the weird stuff. The dance started smoothly enough, just a lot of swaying and pretending I knew what I was doing. But then the groom decided it was time to show off. Hold on, he shouted, jumping up from his chair. "I want to try the pole." Before I could stop him, he sprinted toward the pole in the center of the room, threw himself at it, and immediately slid down like a deflated balloon. His friends lost it. They were doubled over, wheezing with laughter, while I stood there stunned. The groom, still on the floor, looked up at me with a dazed grin. "Okay," he gasped. Maybe not as easy as it looks." I couldn't help it. I burst out laughing, and for a moment, it felt like we were all just a bunch of idiots having the time of our lives. After the groom's disastrous pole attempt, the mood lightened considerably. They tipped well, shoving crumpled bills into my garter with drunken enthusiasm, and the rest of the dance felt more like a goofy party than anything sleazy. By the time it was over, I was grinning like an idiot. As I left the VIP room, I caught Roxy's eye. She raised an eyebrow. "How was it?" "Not terrible," I admitted, still trying to process the absurdity of it all. She snorted. "That's as good as it gets, honey." When my shift finally ended, I sat in the dressing room, peeling off my heels and massaging my sore feet. I felt weird, tired, sure, but also kind of proud. I'd survived my first night. I'd fallen, laughed, danced, and somehow made it through without completely embarrassing myself. Well, not beyond repair anyway. As I left the club, the cool night air hit my face, and I let out a long breath. The city buzzed quietly around me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something other than stress. I felt free. Maybe this job wasn't forever. Maybe I'd move on to something else soon. But for now, it was enough to know that I could handle it. Falls, bachelor parties, and all. And honestly, if I could survive the groom's pole disaster without running out the door, I figured I could survive just about anything. We moved into the house on Sycamore Street when I was 10. It was an old place, one of those creaky 2-story homes with drafty windows, uneven floors, and a basement nobody wanted to talk about. My parents called it a fixer-upper, which basically meant it was the cheapest option they could find. I didn't care. At 10 years old, everything felt like an adventure. I loved exploring the dusty attic, playing hide-and-seek in the overgrown backyard, and peeking into rooms we hadn't unpacked yet. But the best part was my new bedroom. It had a big window that overlooked the front yard and the street beyond. I loved sitting by that window, watching the neighborhood come to life. Kids playing on their bikes, dogs barking, mail trucks rattling by. Everything felt safe from the comfort of my window seat. Until I noticed her. It was the second night after we moved in. I couldn't sleep. I was too excited about starting school and meeting new kids. So, I sat by the window, looking out into the quiet street below, when I saw her for the first time. A little girl standing on the sidewalk just across the street. She was wearing a white dress, too thin for the chilly autumn night, and her long, dark hair hung limp over her shoulders. She wasn't doing anything, just standing there, perfectly still, staring directly at my window. At me. I waved, feeling a little weirded out, but trying to be friendly. She didn't wave back. She didn't move at all. I told myself maybe she was waiting for someone. Maybe she'd lost her way. But something about her felt wrong. The way she stood so still, her arms hanging limply by her sides. The way her face was expressionless, as if she'd forgotten how to smile. After a few minutes, I crawled back into bed, telling myself I was being silly. When I peeked out again, the street was empty. But that was just the beginning. The next night, I saw her again. Same spot, same white dress, same eerie stillness. This time, she was closer, standing at the edge of our lawn, just a few steps away from the sidewalk. I called for my mom. Mom, there's a girl outside. She came in, already in her bathrobe, and looked out the window. But by the time she got there, the girl was gone. Probably just a neighborhood kid, Mom said, brushing it off. It's a new place, sweetie. You'll get used to it. I nodded, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And the next night, she came closer. I woke up around 3 a.m. to that same weird sense of unease. I couldn't explain it, just this feeling like someone was watching me. I rolled over and glanced at the window, and my heart nearly stopped. She was standing in the yard now. Not on the street, not on the sidewalk. In our front yard. Her face was still hidden by her dark hair, but I could feel her gaze, heavy and cold, locked onto me through the glass. I wanted to scream for my parents, but the sound got stuck in my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself to disappear, to wake up from this nightmare. When I opened them again, she was gone. The next morning, I tried to tell my dad, but he was too busy unpacking boxes to pay much attention. It's probably just your imagination, he said, tousling my hair. New house, new neighborhood. It's normal to feel a little spooked. But it wasn't just in my head. That night, I refused to sleep by the window. I moved my blankets and pillows to the opposite side of the room, as far from the glass as I could get. I tried to sleep, but every creak of the old house set my nerves on edge. Around 2 a.m., I couldn't resist anymore. I had a look. I peeked over the edge of my blanket, heart hammering in my chest, and there she was, standing just outside my window. Her face was pressed against the glass, fogging it slightly with her breath. I could see her eyes now, dark, hollow, and empty, like the sockets went too far back. She smiled at me. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a slow, deliberate curl of the lips, like someone imitating a smile they'd seen, but didn't quite understand. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't even blink. All I could do was stare as she raised one pale hand and tapped, lightly, delicately, on the glass. Talk, talk, talk. I bolted out of bed, ran into my parents' room, and shook them awake. There's someone outside, at the window. I cried, choking on my own panic. Dad groaned, annoyed, and grabbed a flashlight. Let's go take a look, he muttered, trudging down the hall. I followed close behind him, heart pounding in my ears. When we reached my room, Dad shined the flashlight toward the window and stopped cold. There were no footprints outside, no sign of anyone standing in the yard. But there, on the glass, were 3 perfect smudges. Fingertips. After that night, things got worse. Every time I looked out the window, she was closer. Some nights, I'd see her standing just outside the house. Other nights, she'd be at the base of the stairs leading to our front door. And one night, oh God, she was inside. I woke up to the sound of soft breathing. Not the deep, slow breaths of my sleeping parents down the hall, but shallow, raspy breaths, like someone struggling to breathe through a clogged throat. I knew, without a doubt, that I wasn't alone. Slowly, trembling, I turned my head toward the door. There she was, standing in the corner of my room, half hidden in shadow, her head tilted slightly, the same strange smile stretching across her face. Her dark hair hung in wet strands, dripping onto the floor. And then she whispered, "Let me in." Her voice was soft, like a child begging to be invited to play. But beneath the sweetness, there was something else, something ancient and hungry. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only lie there, paralyzed with fear, as she took a step closer. "Let me in," she whispered again, her voice a sickening sing-song. Then, just before she reached my bed, she vanished. The next morning, I begged my parents to move. I told them everything, the girl, the tapping, the whispers in the night. They didn't believe me, of course. Why would they? To them, it was just a child's overactive imagination. But I knew the truth. And even though we moved away a few months later, I never forgot her. Even now, years later, I can't sleep with my back to a window. Because sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet and the shadows grow too long, I swear I can hear it again. Talk, 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 and a soft whisper just outside the glass. "Let me in." Looking back, the bracelet was where it all started. Or maybe it was just the first time I noticed that something was wrong. Funny how the smallest things can unlock the biggest truths, isn't it? It was a thin, delicate silver band, engraved with tiny stars. Pretty, definitely not my style though. I found it one Saturday morning, lying on the floor between the couch cushions while cleaning. I didn't think much of it at first. "Hey babe," I called out to Sam, my boyfriend of 2 years. "Did one of your friends leave this?" He glanced up from the kitchen, where he was making coffee, and his expression tightened for just a fraction of a second. It was quick, so quick I almost missed it. Yeah, must have been Rachel's," he said, too casually. Rachel was a friend of ours, one I didn't particularly like. Something about the way she hugged Sam a little too tightly, or how she lingered just a second too long when saying goodbye. But I let it go. Trust is the backbone of any relationship, right? And besides, it was just a bracelet. I should have trusted my gut then. For the next couple of days, little things started piling up like tiny red flags waving just out of sight. Sam's phone, which he used to leave lying face up on the coffee table, was suddenly glued to him, pocketed or flipped over whenever I was around. And then there were the late nights. "Just work," he'd say with a quick peck on my cheek. "Don't wait up." And I didn't. I told myself he was busy, that he was under a lot of pressure. But deep down, something didn't feel right. It was the little changes, the new cologne, the extra effort with his clothes. Sam wasn't the type to care about fashion, but suddenly he was buying new shirts and asking me what I thought of them. At first, I thought maybe he's just trying to impress me, but the nagging voice in the back of my head whispered, or someone else. Still, I ignored it. I wanted to believe in him. I needed to believe in him, because the alternative? That was too painful to even consider. The real turning point came about a week later, when I saw the bracelet again. Sam and I were at a friend's party, just a small gathering, nothing fancy. As we mingled, I spotted Rachel across the room, laughing with a group of people. And there it was, dangling from her wrist, the same silver bracelet with the tiny stars. My heart sank. I told myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe Sam had been telling the truth. Maybe Rachel had left it at our place by accident. But something about the way she glanced over at Sam, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips, made my stomach churn. The rest of the night was a blur. I tried to act normal, but my mind was racing. Every smile, every look between them setting off alarm bells. Was I imagining it? Or was something really going on? I had to know. That night, after we got home, I waited until Sam fell asleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself not to do it. Snooping wasn't me. I wasn't that person. But the bracelet wouldn't leave me alone. So, I slipped out of bed as quietly as I could, grabbed his phone from the nightstand, and crept into the living room. My hands shook as I unlocked it. His password hadn't changed. And there it was. The first thing I saw was a message thread with Rachel, pinned at the top. My heart thudded painfully as I opened it, scrolling through their conversation. At first, it looked innocent, just friendly banter, memes, and random chatter. But the deeper I went, the more the truth unraveled before my eyes. Can't stop thinking about last night. You looked amazing in that dress. And then, the dagger to the heart. Wish I was with you instead of her. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My vision blurred, my hands trembling as I scrolled further. There were photos, pictures of them together, out at restaurants and bars, places he told me he was working late. They weren't just flirting, they were together. I sat there on the couch, numb and shattered, as the weight of the betrayal crushed me. How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? Had everything between us been a lie? Tears blurred my vision, but I wiped them away, forcing myself to stay calm. I couldn't fall apart. Not yet. I needed to confront him, to hear the truth from his own lips. But when I walked back into the bedroom and saw him lying there, sleeping so peacefully, something in me shifted. I realized I didn't need to hear his excuses. I didn't need an apology, or a confession, or promises that he'd change. I needed to leave. The next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't say a word to Sam, didn't even give him the satisfaction of a fight. I just left the bracelet on the nightstand, a silent goodbye, and walked out the door. He called me later, of course, texted, begged for an explanation, but I didn't respond. What was there to say? He had made his choice, and I had made mine. In the days that followed, I grieved, not just for the relationship, but for the future I thought we'd have. It was hard. Some mornings, I could barely get out of bed. But slowly, I started to rebuild. I surrounded myself with friends, threw myself into work, and rediscovered the things I loved, things I'd let go of when I was too busy trying to make us work. And with time, the pain began to fade. Months later, I ran into Rachel at a coffee shop. She looked surprised to see me, awkwardly shifting on her feet as she mumbled a hello. And there, on her wrist, was the silver bracelet. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in a long while. Not because I was happy for her, or because I'd forgiven them, but because I was free. The bracelet wasn't my problem anymore. And that was the most beautiful thing of all. When I was 17, my family moved into a small cul-de-sac in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It wasn't the kind of place where much ever happened. Just a row of cookie-cutter houses, well-manicured lawns, and the occasional dog barking in the distance. For the most part, it was a peaceful place to grow up. But there was one thing about our street that always gave me a weird feeling. The house directly across from us. It looked normal enough. 2 stories, a faded red front door, and a porch swing that creaked in the wind. But nobody lived there. At least, not anymore. The neighbors told us that the last family had moved out suddenly, leaving most of their stuff behind. No one knew why. They just packed a few things, drove off one night, and never came back. For months after we moved in, the house sat empty, with the curtains drawn and the porch swaying ever so slightly, even on windless days. I hated looking at it. It felt like the house was watching. One night, about 6 months after we moved in, I was sitting in my room, working on a school project, when I glanced out the window. I could see the house across the street, bathed in the pale glow of the streetlights. And that's when I saw it. The curtain in the upstairs window was moving. It wasn't just a breeze. It was a slow, deliberate movement, like someone was standing just behind it, brushing it aside to get a better look at me. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze, staring at the window. For a moment, nothing happened. The curtain stopped moving, and the window remained dark. I told myself it was probably just my imagination, maybe a trick of the light or a loose curtain rod shifting in the breeze. Then the light in the upstairs room flicked on. I jumped out of my chair, my pulse racing. The house had been empty for months. There shouldn't have been anyone there. I squinted, trying to make out any shapes through the glare of the window, but all I could see was the silhouette of someone standing behind the curtain. And they were looking directly at me. I slammed my curtains shut, my hands shaking. Maybe someone had moved in without us knowing, I thought. Maybe the realtor forgot to tell us. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. The next morning, I asked my parents if they had noticed any new neighbors moving in across the street. They looked at me like I was crazy. "That house is still empty," my mom said, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I saw the realtor's sign just yesterday." My stomach twisted. That night, I stayed up late, staring at the house through the crack in my curtains. For a long time, nothing happened. The street was quiet, the house was dark. I was starting to think I'd imagined the whole thing, until around midnight, the light in the upstairs window flicked on again. My heart raced. I leaned closer to the window, trying to get a better look, and that's when I saw it. The curtain shifted again, just slightly, and a face appeared behind the glass. It wasn't like any face I'd ever seen. It was pale, almost gray, with sunken eyes and thin, cracked lips. The expression was blank and motionless. Just two empty eyes, staring directly into my window. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just watched. And then very slowly it smiled. Not a friendly smile. This was a wrong smile, like someone who had never smiled before was trying it out for the first time. My skin crawled, and I instinctively yanked my curtains shut. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face. I could still feel it watching me, even from behind the curtains. The next morning, I told my parents what I saw. They brushed it off as a nightmare or some kind of prank. "It's probably just some kid sneaking into the house," my dad said with a shrug. "They'll get bored soon enough." But I knew it wasn't kids. Over the next few nights, the pattern repeated. Every night, just after midnight, the light in the upstairs window would flick on. And every night, I'd see that face behind the curtain, smiling that horrible, unnatural smile. It didn't stop there. One night, around 3 a.m., I woke up to a faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was the wind, but as I listened closer, I realized it was coming from my bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. My heart stopped. I sat up slowly, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't help myself. I turned my head toward the window, and there it was, the same face, pressed against the glass, grinning that same awful grin, its cracked lips spreading just a little too wide. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just sat there, paralyzed with fear, as the thing tapped gently on the glass. Tap, tap, tap. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. No sound, no movement, just gone, as if it had never been there at all. The next morning, I told my parents what happened. They gave me the usual excuses. "It's just your imagination. You were dreaming, the house is still empty." But I knew what I saw. I wasn't imagining it. A few days later, I overheard my mom on the phone with one of the neighbors. They were talking about the house across the street, about how the realtor had finally sold it again. Apparently, every time someone moved in, they left after a few weeks, without any explanation. They never took their furniture. They never came back for their things. "Must be haunted," the neighbor joked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, every muscle in my body tense. Around midnight, the light in the upstairs window flicked on, just like always. I didn't look this time. I didn't want to see that face again, but I could feel it. I knew it was there, watching me. And then, just as I was about to drift off into a restless sleep, I heard it. A voice, soft, faint, and coming from just outside my window. "I'll see you soon." I've been lying to my boyfriend for almost a year now, and it's all because of our dog. Well, his dog, technically. Scout is a chunky little beagle mix with big brown eyes, the attitude of a toddler who just learned the word no, and the appetite of a vacuum cleaner. Scout came with my boyfriend when we moved in together, and I fell in love with both of them, though not necessarily in that order. The thing is, I told my boyfriend that Scout has a mild peanut allergy. And I know it sounds bad. Who lies about something like that? But in my defense, Scout was out of control. The dog is obsessed with peanut butter. If you so much as say peanut within a 5-mile radius, he turns into a drooling menace. The first time my boyfriend gave him a spoonful of peanut butter, it was like watching a shark frenzy. Scout inhaled the whole thing in 2 seconds flat. then spent the rest of the afternoon frantically sniffing the kitchen floor like he was searching for treasure. At first, I thought it was funny, adorable even, but then it became a problem. Every single treat in our house had to be slathered in peanut butter. It was like my boyfriend thought Scout needed a protein-packed snack just to survive the day. Even his medicine was drowned in the stuff like some kind of peanut butter soup. One time, I came home to find my boyfriend making peanut butter popsicles for the dog, which Scout was licking like a man possessed. I swear I could see the dog vibrating. Something had to be done. I didn't plan to lie. It just kind of happened. One night, after another peanut butter overdose, I casually said, "Hey, do you think it's possible Scout might be allergic?" My boyfriend gave me a concerned look. "What do you mean?" And before I could stop myself, I was off to the races. Well, I read that some dogs can have mild peanut allergies, and I don't know, Scout did sneeze earlier, right? To be clear, Scout sneezed because he sniffs everything like he's training to be a drug dog. But my boyfriend didn't know that, and I saw the worry creep into his eyes. "Do you think we should stop giving him peanut butter?" he asked, looking heartbroken. And because I'm apparently a terrible person, I nodded solemnly. Just to be safe. And that was it. I thought it would end there, a little white lie, nothing serious. But then my boyfriend told everyone. His mom, his sister, the neighbor across the street, the mailman, anyone who would listen. "Yeah, Scout's allergic to peanuts. It's a mild allergy, but we're being careful." I watched in horror as this tiny fib snowballed into a full-blown medical history. Now Scout had an allergy that didn't even exist. It's been a year now, and I am living in constant fear that Scout will somehow get his paws on peanut butter and blow my cover. Every time someone offers him a treat, I have to leap into action like I'm defusing a bomb. "No, no, no peanuts," I'll shout, waving my arms like a maniac. People probably think I'm some overprotective dog mom. The worst part is, my boyfriend is so proud of how responsible we are about Scout's condition. He'll pat the dog's head and say, "See, buddy, no peanuts for you. We're keeping you healthy." Meanwhile, Scout just looks at me with those big, sad eyes, like he knows I'm the reason his peanut butter dreams are dead. It's gotten so bad that we can't even keep peanut products in the house anymore. One time, I bought a jar of almond butter, thinking I could sneak it by. Big mistake. Scout immediately caught a whiff and went into a frenzy, scratching at the pantry door like a raccoon on Red Bull. My boyfriend gave me a panicked look. "What if he thinks it's peanut butter?" he said, clutching Scout like the dog might drop dead at any moment. I had to throw the jar away just to calm him down. And now, because karma hates me, my boyfriend has decided to take things a step further. He started making Scout homemade, peanut-free dog treats. I kid you not. He found a recipe blog written by a woman named Cheryl who makes organic, allergen-free biscuits for her 3 poodles. Now our kitchen smells like oat flour and sweet potato, and every week, my boyfriend proudly packs Scout's treats in a little Tupperware containers like a proud parent packing a school lunch. Meanwhile, Scout is absolutely miserable. He knows something's up. Every time we go to the park, and he sees another dog munching on a peanut butter-filled Kong, he stares at me like I'm the worst person alive. The guilt is crushing. I know I need to come clean, but how do you admit to your boyfriend that you've been lying about his dog's health for a year? Every time I try to bring it up, I chicken out. I mean, how do you casually say, "Hey, remember how Scout's allergic to peanuts?" Yeah, about that, it's not exactly a conversation you can ease into over dinner. So now I'm stuck. I've trapped myself in this bizarre lie, and there's no easy way out. I keep waiting for the right moment to confess, but it never comes. And in the meantime, Scout suffers in silence, munching on Cheryl's oat flour abominations and dreaming of the peanut butter that could have been. Maybe one day, I'll finally grow a spine and tell the truth. Or maybe when Scout eventually sneaks a peanut butter treat and nothing happens, I'll pretend it was a miracle recovery. Yeah, that sounds good. A spontaneous, peanut-related miracle. Until then, I'll just keep living this ridiculous, peanut-free life and hoping that Scout forgives me when the truth finally comes out. Picture this. I'm running late for work on a dreary Tuesday morning, juggling a giant tote bag, a coffee, and a sad excuse for an umbrella that lost the fight with the wind about 10 minutes ago. My shoes are already soaked. My hair looks like I spent the night wrestling raccoons. And I've made peace with the fact that today is just not going to be a good day. I stumble into the lobby of my office building, praying that the elevator isn't broken because, frankly, the stairs aren't an option when I'm already carrying half my apartment on my shoulder. Just as I hit the elevator button, someone slides through the door behind me. He's about my age, wearing a suit nice but not intimidating, holding his own sad-looking umbrella and a laptop bag slung over one shoulder. We exchange quick glances that awkward. I acknowledge your existence, but I'm not ready to talk to you kind of look. The elevator dings open, and we both step in. Now, let me tell you something about elevator rides. They're the worst social minefields. Too short for a full conversation, but too long for comfortable silence. And the pressure. Oh, the pressure to not make it weird. I swear, every time I get into an elevator, it feels like I'm on a reality show where the goal is just to survive without making eye contact. Anyway, we both hit our floor buttons. Mine's 14, his is 16, and the doors slide shut. And there it is. The dreaded, suffocating silence of two strangers pretending they don't notice each other. I sip my coffee, hoping it will distract me, but of course, it's still too hot, and I burn the roof of my mouth. Classic. I try not to make a face, but I think he notices because the corner of his mouth twitches like he's holding back a laugh. Hot, he asks, glancing at my cup with an amused smile. I shrug, blowing on the coffee dramatically. Nah, just testing if my taste buds still work. He chuckles, a low, easy laugh that instantly makes the moment feel a little less awkward. And just like that, the mood shifts. That's the first lesson right there. In moments where the air feels heavy with awkwardness, humor is your best friend. Even a small joke can break the tension. And if the other person laughs, congratulations, you've officially avoided weird elevator silence syndrome. You'd think we'd have figured out how to cool down coffee by now, he says, shaking his head. But no, still a mystery of the universe. I nod solemnly, like why Wi-Fi only stops working when you actually need it. Or how the line for coffee always gets twice as long the second you decide to stop by, he adds. Okay, I'll admit it. I'm smiling now. It's a stupid, throwaway conversation, but it's working. That's the thing most people don't realize. Small talk is underrated. Sure, it's not deep or profound, but it's low pressure. It gives people a chance to test the waters without feeling like they're auditioning for a relationship. At this point, the elevator stops on the 5th floor, and we both shuffle aside as someone else steps in. A woman glued to her phone, clearly uninterested in making eye contact with anyone. We wait for the doors to close again, standing in that weird, shared silence of people stuck in a moving box. I glance at him from the corner of my eye, expecting the conversation to die off, but he surprises me. So, he says, leaning against the wall with a casual grin, do you think we'll survive this elevator ride, or should I start making peace with my regrets? I laugh, like really laugh. That was unexpected, and it catches me off guard in the best way. I mean, I have coffee, I say, holding up my cup, so if we get stuck, at least we won't be thirsty. He taps his laptop bag, and I got snacks. Protein bars. The boring kind, though, sorry in advance. Survival essentials. I say with mock seriousness. We'd make it at least 2 hours. And that's the magic right there. He keeps it light, playful, and most importantly, not invasive. He's not asking me for personal details, he's not throwing out pickup lines, and he's definitely not making the situation weird. It's just two strangers sharing a laugh during a mundane moment. We hit the 10th floor, and the other passenger gets off. Now it's just the two of us again, and somehow, it doesn't feel awkward at all. If anything, the conversation has settled into a nice rhythm, like we're two old friends catching up instead of people who just met 2 minutes ago. As the elevator continues its slow ascent, he glances at my tote bag and raises an eyebrow. You moving into the office or just planning to survive the apocalypse? I laugh, nudging the bag with my foot. You'd think, right? No, this is just me being overly optimistic about getting things done today. He nods knowingly. Ah, the I'll get my life together lie. I tell it to myself every Monday. I grin. It's a classic. We reach my floor, 14th, and as the doors slide open, I feel a weird pang of disappointment. It's rare to have such an easy, fun conversation with a stranger, and part of me doesn't want it to end. I step out into the hallway, glancing back at him before the doors close. Well, good luck with those protein bars, I say. He gives me a crooked smile. And good luck conquering the world with your tote bag. The doors start to close, and for a second, I think that's it. Just a fleeting, funny moment in an otherwise dull day. But then, right before the doors shut, he holds them open, just for a second. "Hey," he says, almost like an afterthought. "If you ever need another elevator survival buddy." He pulls out a small, neat business card from his pocket and hands it to me through the narrowing gap. Just his first name, Ethan, and a phone number. Simple, clean, no pressure. I take the card, smiling. I'll keep that in mind. And with that, the doors close, and he's gone. Approaching someone doesn't have to be complicated. It's not about perfect timing or knowing the right things to say. It's about being in the moment and making the other person feel comfortable. Ethan didn't ask me for my number. He didn't hover awkwardly, waiting for a reaction. He just created a little moment of connection, handed me his info, and left the rest up to me. That's the key. Give people the space to decide for themselves. No pressure, no expectations, just a simple offer. And if they don't follow up, that's okay. The goal isn't to win the conversation. It's to make a positive impression, however brief it might be. And you know what? I did text him. Not right away, because, life, but a few days later. Because in a world full of awkward silences, anyone who can make an elevator ride fun is someone worth getting to know. It was supposed to be a normal school lock-in. One of those stay overnight in the gym. No drugs, no alcohol, just wholesome fun deals. The student council organized it, thinking it'd boost school spirit or whatever. And for some reason, a bunch of us signed up. Maybe we were bored. Maybe we thought it would be funny. Either way, it ended up being anything but wholesome. Now, before we dive into what went down, let me just say this. The school should have known better than to lock 100 teenagers inside overnight with nothing to do. You can't cage that kind of chaos. And the moment Jake showed up with that suspicious grin on his face, I knew things were going to get weird. The first few hours were innocent enough. Some kids played board games in the cafeteria. A few people snuck off to the dark corners of the gym to talk, and the teachers supervising us were already half asleep by 10 p.m. But by midnight, boredom had set in, and when boredom sets in, stupid ideas follow. Fast. That's when Jake gathered us in the corner by the vending machines with a proposition. "You guys ever see one of those insane food fights on TV?" he asked, his eyes glinting like he'd just discovered fire. "I think we could do that. But for real." Most people would have said no. Most sane people anyway. But in our sleep-deprived, sugar-fueled state, it sounded like the best idea we'd ever heard. Within minutes, Jake had a full-blown plan. 1. Sneak into the kitchen. 2. Stockpile everything remotely throwable. 3. Wait until the teachers were all dozing off. 4. Unleash hell. The most terrifying part? Everyone was on board. Jake led us like a commander on a secret mission. We tiptoed out of the gym and into the cafeteria, carefully avoiding the sleeping teachers. Dave, wearing someone else's hoodie for disguise purposes, was our lookout, peeking around corners like we were breaking into the Pentagon. The kitchen was unlocked, because of course it was. Our school was terrible at basic security. And inside, it was a gold mine. We found everything. Cans of whipped cream, giant tubs of mashed potatoes, trays of Jell-O, gallons of chocolate pudding, and at least 40 stale dinner rolls from some forgotten banquet. One kid even found a box of frozen pizzas, which was absolutely useless, but he insisted on carrying them anyway. By the time we were done raiding, we had so much food, it looked like we were preparing for a zombie apocalypse. And somehow, nobody noticed. The teachers were still fast asleep, blissfully unaware of the nightmare about to unfold. It started small. Jake picked up a Jell-O cup and hurled it across the gym at Dave, who was standing by the bleachers. The Jell-O hit him square in the chest with a satisfying splat. For a split second, everything was silent, and then Dave grabbed a roll off the pile and chucked it back. That was the spark. Within seconds, all hell broke loose. Dinner rolls rained down from every direction, like some kind of pastry artillery. Whipped cream cans hissed as they sprayed across the gym, coating everything in sight. A kid named Sam got absolutely wrecked by a gallon of milk that burst open on impact, flooding the gym floor with a white tide. And that was just the beginning. Jake, because of course it was Jake, grabbed an entire tray of mashed potatoes and launched it at the group playing Uno in the corner. One kid screamed, "Why?" as he was hit full force with a wall of potatoes, but by then, it was too late. The food fight had escalated to total war. The first teacher to wake up was Mr. Branson, the gym coach. He sat up on the air mattress he'd dragged into the corner, rubbing his eyes groggily. Then he saw it. The whipped cream streaks on the walls, the piles of mashed potatoes on the floor, the chaos unfolding right in front of him. And that's when Jake threw a pudding cup directly at his face. The pudding hit Mr. Branson with a wet slap, and for a moment, he just sat there stunned. Then his face twisted into the angriest expression I've ever seen, and he bellowed, "Who started this?" Nobody answered, mostly because we were too busy laughing so hard we couldn't breathe. Mr. Branson tried to get control of the situation, but by then, it was impossible. Half the kids were hiding behind overturned tables, chucking rolls like grenades. Someone had filled a trash can with spaghetti and dumped it over a kid's head. Another kid, completely unhinged, was running around with 2 whipped cream cans like he was dual-wielding pistols. The teachers finally gave up trying to stop us and just joined forces with the janitor to drag giant rolls of plastic sheeting across the gym to contain the damage. Spoiler, it didn't work. By 2 a.m., the gym looked like a battlefield. The air smelled like sour milk and instant mashed potatoes, and there were puddles of pudding everywhere. Jake, covered head to toe in whipped cream, stood on the stage like some kind of victorious warlord. And then, because Jake never knows when to stop, he picked up the frozen pizzas and yelled, "Last round! Pizza attack!" I swear, time slowed down. Jake hurled the pizzas one by one, frisbee style, into the crowd. One hit the gym scoreboard, where it stuck like a weird, greasy trophy. Another hit the school mascot square in the face, knocking his giant bobblehead off. The final pizza? It hit Mr. Branson in the back of the head. That was it. Game over. At 3 a.m., the principal showed up in sweatpants and a robe, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. We were all corralled into the cafeteria, where the teachers took attendance and gave us the most exhausted lecture I've ever heard. "Why?" the principal asked, his voice hoarse and filled with despair. "Why would you do this?" Jake, still wiping whipped cream from his face, just shrugged and said, "It seemed like a good idea at the time." We were all given detention for the rest of the semester. The janitor refused to speak to anyone for a week. And Mr. Branson? He retired early the following year. The Great Lock-in food fight became the stuff of legend. No other class has ever tried another lock-in, and the gym still smells vaguely of spaghetti to this day. They had to replace the scoreboard because the pizza stain wouldn't come off, and the school banned whipped cream cans from all future events. Jake, of course, is a hero in our eyes. Every time we tell the story, he insists that the pizza toss was the greatest shot of his life. And honestly, he's not wrong. Years later, at reunions, people still talk about that night. And every time they do, Jake grins and says, "I told you it'd be legendary." And you know what? He was right. This happened a few years ago, and to this day, it feels like I'm carrying a ticking time bomb in my back pocket. It's the kind of story that makes you sit up at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how the hell your life got so messy. I was working at this small marketing firm, a tight-knit place where everyone knew everyone's business. My boss, Dave, was this cool, laid-back guy in his mid-40s. He was the kind of boss who cracked dad jokes and bought beer for the office on Fridays. Everyone loved him. Married, 2 kids, and a golden retriever. The whole picture-perfect suburban life. Then there was his wife, Liz. I first met Liz at the company holiday party. She was one of those effortlessly charming women who could make small talk feel like a therapy session. She had this warm laugh, bright green eyes, and just enough sass to keep everyone on their toes. I remember thinking, wow, Dave really hit the jackpot. But beyond that, I didn't think much of her. I mean, she was my boss's wife. She was polite, friendly, and far out of my league. Or so I thought. Things took a turn about 6 months after that party. Dave started working longer hours, stressed about some big client, and I started seeing Liz more often. She'd swing by the office to drop off lunch or pick up something Dave forgot. And each time, we'd chat for a bit. Nothing inappropriate, just friendly conversation. At least that's how it started. But after a while, the conversation started getting more personal. She'd ask me about my life, my love life, or lack thereof, and give me these little compliments that felt more than just polite. One Friday afternoon, she came by the office with lunch for Dave, only to find out he'd left for a last-minute meeting. "You want this?" she asked, holding up the sandwich bag. "No point in it going to waste." "Sure," I said, figuring there was no harm in a free lunch. We ended up sitting in the break room, eating and talking for what felt like hours. She told me about how things had been rough at home, how Dave was so caught up in work that they barely talked anymore. And somewhere in the middle of all that venting, she said, "It's nice to talk to someone who actually listens." That should have been my cue to change the subject. But instead, I said something dumb like, "Well, I've got ears anytime you need them." She smiled, and that smile felt dangerous. Fast forward a few weeks, and Liz started texting me. At first, it was innocent stuff, memes, little jokes, random questions about work. But then the text started coming more often, late at night, and with a tone that felt different. One night, she sent me a text that said, "Ever feel like you're invisible?" Before I could even think, I replied, "All the time." And that's when everything spiraled. The first time it happened, it felt like stepping off a cliff. Liz texted me one night asking if I wanted to grab a drink. Dave was out of town on business, and she could use the company. I knew it was a bad idea. I knew, but I went anyway. We met at this quiet little bar on the edge of town, the kind of place where nobody knows your name, and nobody cares. We talked, drank, and laughed way too much. And at some point between the second and third round, she leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't one of those tentative, testing the waters kisses. It was full-on, no holding back, we're crossing a line kind of kiss. And the worst part? I kissed her back. One drink led to another, and before I knew it, we were back at her house, Dave's house. As soon as the door clicked shut behind us, everything felt like it was happening in fast forward. Clothes hit the floor, bad decisions piled up. And just like that, I was in bed with my boss's wife. The next morning was pure panic. I woke up tangled in sheets that weren't mine, surrounded by evidence of the worst mistake I'd ever made. Liz was still asleep, looking way too peaceful for someone who'd just blown up both our lives. I, on the other hand, felt like I was about to throw up from the sheer weight of what we'd done. I grabbed my clothes and started sneaking out, hoping to get out of there before she woke up. But just as I reached the door, I heard her voice. "You don't have to sneak out, you know." I turned, half-dressed, heart pounding in my chest. This was a mistake. Liz smiled, completely unfazed. "Maybe, but it was fun, wasn't it?" I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded like the idiot I am and bolted. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that I learned my lesson and never spoke to Liz again. But life isn't that simple. She kept texting me, and every time, I told myself it was the last time. But we kept meeting up at bars and parking lots, once even in the office after hours. Every time, I knew I was digging myself deeper into a hole I'd never climb out of. But I couldn't stop. And then it happened, the text that shattered everything. One morning, Dave called me into his office. He looked different, not angry, but tired, defeated. "You know," he said quietly, "Liz and I are going through a rough patch." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I didn't know that. He gave me a sad smile. "Yeah, she's been acting strange lately. Texting someone a lot. Staying out late." My stomach dropped. I knew exactly where this conversation was going, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. "I don't suppose," Dave said slowly, "you know anything about that? Would you?" To this day, I don't know if Dave knew the truth, or if he just suspected. Either way, I gave him the world's lamest excuse and got the hell out of his office as fast as I could. After that, I quit my job, told him I found something better, but we both knew that was a lie. I blocked Liz's number, moved to a new city, and tried to pretend none of it ever happened. But sometimes, late at night, I'll think about that summer, about Liz and Dave, and all the mistakes I made. And I wonder if karma's still out there, waiting for the perfect moment to catch up with me. When I agreed to take my first job, I told myself it's just one night. A quick in and out, no big deal. You've had awkward Tinder dates. How bad could this be? I thought it'd be easy, transactional, and forgettable. Spoiler, it was none of those things. The client's name was Drew. 30-something, quiet, not too specific about what he wanted, just good company for a couple of hours. That sounded manageable, right? What I didn't know was that Drew's place would contain more fur than an animal shelter during shedding season, and neither of us were remotely prepared for what would unfold. When I arrived at his apartment, the first thing I noticed was the smell, a heavy mix of incense and something musky. The kind of smell you only get from too many cats living in one space. I wasn't even inside the door yet, and a cloud of fur was already clinging to my jacket like it had plans to stay. Drew opened the door looking harmless enough, tall, wiry, with a sheepish grin that suggested he wasn't entirely sure what to do with me. He wore an old hoodie and jeans, looking more like someone expecting pizza delivery than, well, me. Hi, he said, scratching the back of his neck. You're early. Traffic was good, I replied awkwardly. It was a lie. My Uber driver had almost killed us twice. But I wasn't about to admit I'd arrived 20 minutes early out of pure anxiety. The first thing that hit me when I stepped inside was the cats. They were everywhere, lounging on the couch, slinking under tables, peeking out from behind curtains like tiny furry spies. There had to be at least 6, though they moved so fast it was hard to tell. One of them immediately jumped onto my shoulder like I was a pirate, and another began weaving between my legs like a furry snake. Sorry, Drew muttered, gently shooing a cat off the kitchen counter. They get excited around new people. I smiled, even though I was already regretting my life choices. Big cat lover, huh? Yeah, you could say that. He shuffled his feet awkwardly. You're not allergic, are you? Nope, I lied again. I could already feel my throat tightening just a little, but I figured I could tough it out for a couple of hours. How bad could it get? We sat down on the couch, cats immediately swarming us like I was a new toy they needed to investigate. Drew offered me a glass of wine, which I accepted because honestly I needed it. As I took a sip, one of the cats climbed into my lap and stared up at me with unblinking eyes, like it was silently judging every decision I'd made that had led me here. So, Drew began fidgeting with his glass. This is my first time doing this. Mine too, I blurted before I could stop myself. He looked surprised. Really? I nodded, realizing too late how unprofessional that sounded. I mean, first time tonight. He laughed, an awkward, genuine laugh that made him seem less like a stranger and more like someone I might have met at a coffee shop. Well, at least we're both figuring this out together, right? We talked for a while, and to my surprise, it wasn't awful. Drew wasn't creepy or demanding, just lonely. He worked in IT, lived alone, and apparently found human interaction much harder than debugging servers. People are like broken software, he said at one point. You try to figure out what's wrong, but there's never a clear error code. I snorted into my wine. That's weirdly deep. He shrugged. Comes with the job. Just as I started to relax, though, the sneezing began. At first, it was just 1 or 2 small sneezes, cute almost. I tried to play it off, dabbing my nose with a napkin and hoping Drew wouldn't notice. But within minutes, I was in full-blown allergy meltdown. My eyes watered, my nose ran like a faucet, and my sneezes became loud, uncontrollable explosions that startled the cats and sent them scattering in every direction. Are you okay? Drew asked, looking genuinely concerned. Yeah, I'm fine. I wheezed, trying to act normal, as if I wasn't falling apart at the seams. It's just the dust? He gave me a skeptical look. You're allergic to the cats, aren't you? No! I sneezed so hard mid-sentence that the glass of wine almost slipped from my hand. I mean, maybe a little. Drew looked horrified. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I should have asked. It's fine. I gasped between sneezes, eyes streaming. I just need some fresh air. Maybe a Benadryl, or a shot of adrenaline, or a flamethrower. Drew scrambled to find his coat. Come on, let's get you outside. I feel terrible. He ushered me out onto the tiny balcony, where the cool night air hit my face like a blessing. I leaned against a railing, gulping in deep breaths, while Drew stood awkwardly beside me, looking like a man who just ruined a first date and had no idea how to fix it. I'm really sorry, he said again, shoving his hands in his pockets. I didn't mean for the night to go like this. I gave him a watery smile, still sniffing. Honestly, it's kind of funny. If nothing else, you'll have a great story for the next time you do this. He chuckled, but there was something sad in his expression. Yeah, if there's a next time. We stood there in silence for a moment, the city buzzing quietly beneath us. And then, in a rare burst of honesty, Drew said, It's not really about the escort part for me. I just wanted someone to talk to. I know that probably sounds pathetic. It doesn't, I replied, and to my surprise, I meant it. He smiled, and for the first time all night, it felt like we were just two people. No transaction, no expectations. Just two lonely souls sharing a moment on a chilly balcony, trying to make sense of life and allergies. Eventually, Drew walked me back inside. Well, more like rushed me through the furry gauntlet of cats, and handed me an envelope with cash. Thank you, he said, his voice sincere, for putting up with all this. I smiled, tucking the envelope into my jacket. Anytime. Maybe next time, fewer cats. He laughed. Deal. As I left his apartment, the cool night air wrapping around me, I couldn't help but smile. The night hadn't gone according to plan, not even close. But somehow it was okay. I'd survived my first gig, sneezing fits and all. And maybe, just maybe, I'd help someone feel a little less lonely, if only for a couple of hours. I walked home with my nose still running and fur clinging to my clothes, feeling oddly accomplished. Escorting wasn't what I expected, but then again, life rarely is. And if nothing else, I'd learned an important lesson. Always carry Benadryl. Always. It was late November, and I was driving back to my parents' place for Thanksgiving. I had about a 4-hour drive ahead of me, and I didn't leave the city until close to 9 p.m. because of work. I told myself I'd get some coffee on the way and power through. Nothing I hadn't done before. The highway stretched out like an endless ribbon of black, lit only by my headlights and the occasional flash of an oncoming car. As I drove deeper into the countryside, the buildings thinned out, the radio lost its signal, and the road became nothing but empty fields on both sides. The farther I got, the more isolated I felt. Somewhere around the halfway point, I noticed the gas gauge dipping dangerously close to empty. I cursed myself for not filling up before leaving the city. Luckily, after a few more miles, I spotted a faded sign for a gas station up ahead. I slowed down and took the exit, the tires crunching on the uneven asphalt as I pulled off the highway. The gas station was a lonely little place, just two pumps under a flickering overhead light with a rundown convenience store beside it. There were no other cars, no signs of life, just the low hum of the fluorescent lights. It looked like one of those places you see in horror movies, the kind of place where things go wrong. But I was running on fumes, so I pulled in. I stepped out of the car, the cold night air biting into my skin, and started pumping gas. The only sound was the rhythmic click of the pump and the occasional rustle of wind through the dry weeds around the lot. The whole time, I had this feeling, like I was being watched. I glanced around, but there was no one in sight. Just the empty highway in the distance and the dark woods beyond the gas station. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was just being paranoid. Then I saw it. In the reflection of my car's window, I saw someone standing at the edge of the lot, just barely visible in the shadows. A man standing perfectly still, watching me. I whipped around, but there was no one there. My heart pounded as I scanned the area, every nerve in my body on edge. I knew I saw something, someone, but now the lot was empty, just as before. I told myself it was a trick of the light, finished pumping gas as quickly as I could, and jumped back into the car. I locked the doors, my hands shaking slightly as I turned the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I pulled out of the lot, eager to put some distance between me and that creepy little station. As I merged back onto the highway, I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my stomach dropped. There, sitting in the back seat, was a man. His face was pale and expressionless, his eyes sunken and dark like twin voids. He was wearing a dark jacket, his hands folded neatly in his lap, as if he'd been sitting there the whole time. And he was staring directly at me through the mirror. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the empty road. My heart felt like it was going to explode out of my chest. I twisted around in my seat, ready to bolt out of the car. But there was no one there. The back seat was empty. For a long moment, I just sat there in the middle of the highway, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I could still feel the cold sweat running down my back. The image of that man burned into my brain. I told myself I was tired, that I was just seeing things because of the long drive and the weird gas station. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, the fear wouldn't go away. I locked the doors again, double-checking this time, and forced myself to keep driving. For the next half hour, I couldn't stop glancing in the rearview mirror. Every shadow, every flicker of passing headlights made my heart skip a beat. But the back seat stayed empty. I started to relax, telling myself it really had just been a hallucination. But then, just as I reached the outskirts of the next town, it happened again. In the corner of the mirror, I saw movement, just a flicker at first, like a shadow shifting in the back seat. My hands tightened on the wheel, and my pulse skyrocketed. I forced myself to glance up. There he was, the same man, sitting perfectly still in the back seat, his hollow eyes staring straight through me. And this time, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that says, "I know something you don't." I swerved to the side of the road, my heart hammering in my chest, and scrambled out of the car so fast I almost tripped over my own feet. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of that car. I stood there on the side of the highway, gasping for breath, staring at the car like it might come alive and swallow me whole. The back seat was still empty. No sign of the man. After a few minutes, I forced myself to get back in the car. I was terrified, but I couldn't stay out there on the side of the highway all night. I locked the doors, gripped the wheel, and drove the rest of the way to my parents' house without looking in the mirror once. When I finally pulled into their driveway, I practically ran inside, leaving my car unlocked for the first time in years. I told my parents what had happened, but they just gave me those worried parent looks, the kind that say, maybe you need some sleep. And maybe they were right. But here's the thing. The next morning, when I went out to grab my bag from the car, I found something on the back seat. A single black glove. I don't own any black gloves. I never drove that car again. For years, I've told my family I don't believe in marriage. Every holiday, every family reunion, and every awkward conversation with nosy relatives, I've stuck to the same story. Marriage isn't for me. I'm just not the type. And for the most part, they've stopped asking. My mom still drops the occasional, "Are you sure?" whenever she sees me playing with my niece, but I've gotten pretty good at brushing it off. "I've got too much going on right now, Mom," I say. I don't need a wedding on top of it. What they don't know, what I've never told anyone, is that I do want to get married. I want it so badly it hurts. I want the whole thing. The vows, the rings, the stupid cake-cutting ceremony. I want the arguments over what song we'll dance to and the quiet, everyday moments that come after the honeymoon. I want someone to say, "That's my husband," with a smile on their face. But I can't. Not yet, anyway. Because the person I want to marry is still legally married to someone else. I've been with Chris for 4 years now. He's everything I could ever want in a partner. Kind, funny, dependable in a way that feels like solid ground beneath my feet. We live together, share a dog, and have a Sunday morning routine that feels more sacred than church. But there's one catch. He's been fighting a divorce for 7 years. When we first started dating, I didn't think much of it. "It's just paperwork," he told me, brushing it off like it was no big deal. His ex-wife was dragging things out, refusing to sign, filing endless motions, anything to keep him tied to her out of spite. It was a mess, but I thought it'll be over soon. These things take time. Except it didn't end. Months turned into years. Every time we thought it was finally wrapping up, his ex found a new way to stall the process. At this point, it's not even about the money or the assets. It's just about control. As long as she's still technically his wife, she gets to keep a piece of him. And me? I'm stuck in limbo, waiting for a future that feels more like a dream than a possibility. I didn't realize how much it was affecting me until last Christmas, when my cousin announced she was engaged. Everyone was thrilled. There were hugs, champagne toasts, and plans for a spring wedding. And there I was sitting on the edge of the couch, clapping politely, pretending I didn't feel like I was suffocating. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room, staring at the glowing Christmas tree and wondering if I'd ever get to make an announcement like that. I could picture it so clearly, standing in front of my family, holding Chris's hand, watching my mom cry tears of joy. It felt so real that for a moment, I forgot it wasn't possible. Then reality came crashing back in. No engagement. No wedding. Just more waiting. The hardest part isn't the waiting, it's the lying. I hate lying to my family. Every time someone asks if I've thought about marriage, I want to scream, of course I have. But how do you explain that you're stuck waiting for someone else's divorce to come through? How do you tell your mom that the love of your life is still legally tied to another woman? I tell myself I'm sparing them the complicated truth, that I'm protecting them from a situation they wouldn't understand. But really, I think I'm just protecting myself, because if I tell them the truth, I'll have to admit out loud that I have no control over when or if this chapter of my life will end. I'll have to confront the fact that I could spend years waiting for something that might never happen. And the thought of that is too much to bear. A few weeks ago, my best friend invited me to a wedding expo. She's newly engaged and wanted someone to tag along for moral support while she picked out floral arrangements and tasted cake samples. I should have said no. I should have made up an excuse and stayed home. But for some reason, I went. It was torture. Everywhere I looked, there were couples holding hands, flipping through invitation templates, and talking excitedly about their big day. I kept picturing Chris and me in their place, imagining what our wedding would look like. I even saw a pair of wedding bands that felt like us. Simple silver, nothing flashy. I wanted to buy them right then and there, as if somehow that would make the dream real. But instead, I stood there, frozen, while my best friend gushed over flower arrangements. When I got home that night, Chris was waiting for me on the couch, our dog curled up at his feet. "How was it?" he asked, giving me that soft, familiar smile that always makes my heart ache in the best way. I sat down beside him, resting my head on his shoulder. "It was fine," I whispered, even though it wasn't. Even though the weight of what we couldn't have felt heavier than ever. Some nights, I lie awake, wondering how long I can keep this up, how many more holidays I can spend pretending I don't want what everyone else has, how many more lies I can tell before they start to crack under the pressure. I know Chris feels the weight of it too. He doesn't talk about it much, but I see it in the way his shoulders slump when he checks his email for updates from his lawyer. I see it in the way he kisses me, like he's trying to make up for the fact that we're stuck in this liminal space, caught between two lives. We've talked about eloping, of course. It's become our running joke. "Let's just go to Vegas," we say laughing, even though part of me knows it's not really a joke. But even if we did, it wouldn't fix anything. The divorce would still hang over us like a shadow, a reminder that we're not quite free. For now, I'll keep pretending. I'll keep telling my family I don't believe in marriage, because it's easier than explaining the truth. I'll keep dodging questions, faking smiles, and showing up to weddings with a cheerful face, even though every toast feels like a knife to the heart. But one day, I'll tell them the truth. I'll stand in front of my family, hold Chris's hand, and say, "This is the person I waited for. This is the person I chose, even when it wasn't easy. And when that day comes, it will be worth every lie, every secret, and every second of waiting. Until then, I'll carry this dream quietly, tucked away where no one else can see it. Because some dreams are too precious to share until they finally come true." I've been living a lie for 2 years now, and it smells like wet canvas, burnt marshmallows, and bug spray. My boyfriend is convinced that I love camping. I don't. In fact, I hate it with every fiber of my being. But here I am, an unwilling outdoorswoman trapped by my own bad decisions, and I have no idea how to get out. It all started on our third date. We were still in that early stage where everything feels fresh and exciting, and you're desperately trying to impress each other. You know the drill. Laughing too hard at jokes, pretending you're super into documentaries about World War II, and conveniently glossing over the fact that you're allergic to his favorite cologne. Anyway, we were having coffee when he casually mentioned how much he loves camping. "It's the ultimate freedom," he said, eyes glowing with excitement. "Just you, nature, and the stars. Nothing beats it." Then he looked at me and asked, "What about you? You like camping, right?" Now, the smart thing to do would have been to tell the truth. No, I do not like camping. I like showers, pillows, and Wi-Fi. But instead, I smiled like an idiot and said, "Oh my God, I love camping." I thought it was a harmless little fib, I figured he'd take me camping maybe once, and I could grit my teeth through a single weekend of dirt, mosquitoes, and questionable bathroom situations. No big deal, right? Wrong. It turns out my boyfriend isn't just a casual camper. He's a full-on camping enthusiast. Before I knew it, he was inviting me on trips every couple of weeks. We camp in forests, near lakes, in the mountains. If there's a patch of dirt and a place to pitch a tent, we're there. He even bought us matching sleeping bags, which he referred to as our cocoon of love. And the worst part? I gotten too good at pretending to enjoy it. The first trip was a nightmare. I didn't sleep at all because I was 100% sure a bear was going to eat me in the middle of the night. Every rustle of a leaf sounded like a death sentence. But somehow, I made it through. And when we got back, I plastered on my best fake smile and said, "That was amazing." He beamed and kissed me on the forehead, and I thought, okay, maybe that's the last time. It wasn't. It was only the beginning. Now I'm living in camping hell. Every time he suggests a trip, I have to act like I'm thrilled about the idea. Oh, another weekend without running water? Count me in. Meanwhile, I'm internally screaming. I've become an expert at looking like I'm enjoying myself, smiling through bug bites, pretending that burnt hot dogs are a gourmet meal, and acting like sleeping on rocks doesn't make me want to cry. Last summer, we went camping during a heat wave, and I thought I was going to die of dehydration. At one point, I seriously considered accidentally tripping and spraining my ankle just so I could go home early. But I didn't, because love is suffering or something like that. The worst part is he started calling me his outdoor goddess. I swear he genuinely believes I was born to live in a tent. "You're a natural," he says, completely oblivious to the fact that I Google how to look comfortable while camping before every trip. I even bought a stupid hat with a mosquito net because I thought it might make me look more outdoorsy. Spoiler, it didn't. And now, he's planning a 2-week camping trip. 2 whole weeks in the wilderness with no showers, no toilets, and no escape. I try to suggest renting a cabin instead, just to mix things up. But he looked so disappointed that I immediately backtracked. Forget the cabin. Tents are way more fun, I said, already regretting my life choices. I know I need to come clean. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not, especially not someone who willingly sleeps on the ground and calls it relaxing. But how do I tell him the truth without crushing his spirit? Camping isn't just a hobby for him. It's his thing. It's where he feels happiest, most at peace. What if telling him I hate, it makes him think we're not compatible? What if he looks at me like I've been lying to him this whole time, which, okay, I have, and says, "If you don't love camping, do you even love me?" It sounds ridiculous, I know, but love makes you do stupid things. Like sleep in a tent during a thunderstorm because you don't want the guy you like to think you're high maintenance. I keep telling myself I'll confess on the next trip. This is it, I say, as I roll up my sleeping bag and pretend I know how to tie knots. But then we get to the campsite, and he looks so happy, setting up the tent like a little kid building a fort, and I just can't. I don't want to ruin that look on his face. So I bite my tongue and pretend I love every mosquito-infested minute of it. Maybe one day, I'll finally admit that I'd rather spend my weekends binge-watching Netflix in an air-conditioned apartment than roasting marshmallows over an open fire. But for now, I'll keep playing the part of the outdoor goddess he thinks I am. And who knows? Maybe I'll even surprise myself one day and actually enjoy it. Or maybe I'll just get really, really good at faking it. Either way, I'm bringing an inflatable mattress on the next trip. Love only goes so far. My back is limits. If you've ever looked at something broken in your house and thought, I can fix that myself, you'll understand the mindset I was in. It wasn't about saving money. No, it was about pride. There's a kind of twisted satisfaction in handling things without calling a professional. It makes you feel competent, capable, invincible, even. Spoiler alert, I was not invincible. It all started with my water heater. The thing had been making these strange noises like a small, angry robot trapped inside. It would rattle, clunk, and hiss whenever the water ran. At first, I ignored it, but one morning, I turned on the shower and got hit with an Arctic blast. No hot water, just bone-chilling, ice-cold regret. I Googled the issue because obviously Google is the best plumber, right? And found out that the problem was probably sediment buildup in the tank. Easy fix, the internet told me. Just flush the water heater. They made it sound so simple, like unclogging a drain or changing a light bulb. No need to call anyone. Just open a valve, drain the tank, refill it, and you're golden. Piece of cake. So, I grabbed my wrench, turned off the heater, and marched down to the basement, determined to take care of business. The water heater was old, but it still looked functional. I stood there for a moment, feeling like some sort of handy savant. Just me versus the machine. Mistake number 1, confidence. I attached a hose to the drain valve and ran it to the floor drain. Then I twisted the valve open, and nothing. A trickle of water, followed by a hiss of air. The tank wasn't draining. At this point, any sensible person would have paused to reconsider. Maybe do a little more research. Call a professional, perhaps. Not me. No. I was on a mission. I figured the sediment at the bottom must have clogged the valve, so I gave it a few good taps with my wrench. Still nothing. I started turning the valve harder, twisting with all the strength I could muster. Mistake number 2, applying force to things you don't understand. Suddenly, the valve snapped. Not just a little crack. Oh no. It broke clean off, and water came blasting out of the tank like I just pissed off Poseidon himself. Within seconds, the basement was a disaster zone. Hot water shot out of the broken valve, spraying everything in its path. It was like a fire hose had gone berserk. The sound was deafening, an angry roar of water slamming against the concrete floor. At first, I just stood there, stunned, trying to comprehend what I'd just done. My brain was still catching up, processing the fact that I had unleashed a hellstorm in my own basement. Shit, I yelled, scrambling to shut off the main water supply. And here's where the real fun began. I couldn't find the shutoff valve. The basement had one of those old plumbing setups where the shutoff was hidden somewhere between a maze of rusty pipes and weird, unlabeled knobs. I was twisting everything I could find, desperately trying to stop the geyser that was now flooding the room. At this point, the water was ankle deep and rising fast. Steam filled the air, making it hard to see. I slipped on the wet floor, landing flat on my back with a loud splash. For a moment, I just lay there in the growing puddle, soaking wet and cursing my own stupidity. I could hear the water heater groaning, its internal pressure building, like some ancient beast about to explode. That's when it hit me. This thing could literally blow up. I'd heard the stories about water heaters that burst like bombs when they malfunction. People have had their entire basements destroyed. Some unlucky souls even get injured or killed when these things go off. Great, I thought. This is how I die. Flooded and blown up in my own basement. Perfect. With water still gushing from the heater and my panic meter now at 11, I did the only thing I could think of. I called 911. 911. What's your emergency? Hi. I said, trying to sound calm while water sloshed around my feet. So, my water heater exploded, and now my basement is flooding in. Is there a fire or gas leak? The operator asked, sounding bored, like flooding morons with broken appliances was her Tuesday specialty. Not yet, I said, but the heater's making some really angry noises, so maybe soon? That got her attention. Stay out of the basement, she instructed firmly. We're sending the fire department. Within minutes, I heard the sirens. I climbed out of the basement, drenched and shivering, just as 2 firefighters kicked open my front door. They rushed past me without a word, armed with tools and hoses like they were storming a castle. I stood there dripping on my own carpet, feeling both relieved and incredibly stupid. It took them less than 10 minutes to shut off the water and stabilize the heater. When they came back upstairs, one of the firefighters gave me a long, pitying look, the kind of look you give someone who almost Darwined themselves out of existence. Next time, he said, grinning, maybe call a plumber, huh? Yeah, I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. That's probably a good idea. The damage wasn't catastrophic, thank God. A couple of ruined boxes, a soggy basement rug, and a scalding dose of humility. But I learned a valuable lesson that day. Water heaters are not to be trifled with. Now, every time I see a YouTube tutorial that starts with "this is a simple DIY fix," I think twice. And every time someone mentions doing their own plumbing, I get this little twitch in my eye like I've seen some things. Because let me tell you, a DIY project can go from "I got this" to call the fire department in about 3 seconds flat. And that's not a lesson you want to learn the hard way. The first crack in our relationship came in the form of a hoodie. I know that sounds ridiculous, like how could a hoodie ruin a relationship? But this wasn't just any hoodie. This was his hoodie. The one I used to steal when I stayed over, oversized and soft, smelling faintly of his cologne and laundry detergent. It was my comfort blanket, a symbol of all the little things I thought we had. Until it wasn't. It started one chilly Friday night. I had gone over to Liam's apartment after work, exhausted and ready for some low-effort Netflix and snacks. As soon as I stepped inside, I saw it, his black hoodie draped over the back of a chair. Naturally, I grabbed it and pulled it over my head. The fabric was soft and familiar against my skin, but something was off. It didn't smell like Liam. Not the way it usually did, at least. The scent was different, sweet, floral, almost like a perfume. I tugged the collar up to my nose and took another sniff. My stomach twisted. That wasn't his cologne. That wasn't even mine. Hey, when did you wash this? I called out, trying to keep my tone casual. Liam popped his head out from the kitchen, a beer in hand. Huh? Oh, I don't know. A couple of days ago, I guess. He shrugged like it was no big deal and went back to cooking. But it was a big deal. I knew every inch of that hoodie. Its scent was burned into my brain like muscle memory. And this was something else entirely. I brushed it off at first. Maybe someone at work had hugged him, or he'd loaned the hoodie to a friend. It was stupid to jump to conclusions over a smell. But once the seed of doubt was planted, it started growing, taking root in my mind. Little things that I'd ignored before now stood out, sharp and glaring. The late texts, the sudden guy's nights, the way he started locking his phone. Small changes, but enough to make me uneasy. And then there was the distance. Not the physical kind, we were still spending time together. But emotionally, it was like he had drifted into a different orbit, just out of reach. Conversations felt forced, and his kisses were more like habits than affection. I tried to shake it off, but the hoodie lingered in the back of my mind like a splinter I couldn't ignore. A few nights later, the hoodie mystery got even stranger. Liam was in the shower, and I was curled up on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through Instagram. Out of habit, I opened his account to see if he'd posted anything new. I didn't find any new photos, but I did notice a tag. It was from someone named Bella. The picture was a mirror selfie of a girl in a black hoodie. Liam's black hoodie. The caption read, "Cozy nights in love." My heart stopped. She wasn't just some random girl. She was wearing my boyfriend's hoodie. And from the way she smiled at the camera, all soft and satisfied, it was obvious this wasn't the first time she'd worn it. I stared at the screen, my heart racing, the pieces clicking together one by one. The floral scent on the hoodie, the late nights, the distance. Bella. When Liam came out of the bathroom, towel slung around his waist, I didn't even give him a chance to get comfortable. "Who's Bella?" I asked, holding up my phone with the post still on display. He froze for a split second, and in that moment, I knew everything I needed to know. The look on his face wasn't one of confusion, it was guilt. Pure unfiltered guilt. "She's just a friend," he said too quickly. "Why are you even looking at that?" I stood up, anger bubbling to the surface. "A friend? Wearing your hoodie? Calling it a cozy night in? Do you think I'm stupid?" Liam rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. "It's not what it looks like." I laughed, an ugly, bitter sound that surprised even me. "Oh really? Because it looks a lot like you've been lying to me." He sat down on the edge of the couch, running his hands through his wet hair. "Look, Ash, I was going to tell you. It just happened." Those 3 words, it just happened, as if cheating was some kind of accident, like tripping over a curb. "How long?" I asked quietly, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. He hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. "Months," he admitted finally. But it didn't mean anything. It was just, he trailed off, as if the right words could somehow fix the damage. "Just what?" I snapped. "Just a game? Just a way to pass the time?" He didn't answer. The silence between us stretched, heavy and suffocating. I felt like I was drowning in it, in the weight of everything I thought we had, now crumbling around me. I wanted to scream, cry, throw things, anything to release the pressure building inside me. But instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I took off the hoodie, folded it neatly, and placed it on the couch between us. "Here," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Give it to Bella. Seems like it belongs to her now." Liam stared at the hoodie, his expression a mix of guilt and disbelief. Ashley, no, I cut him off. I'm done. And with that, I grabbed my keys and walked out the door, leaving the hoodie and him behind. In the weeks that followed, Liam tried to reach out. He texted, called, even showed up at my apartment once, begging for another chance. But I was done. Some betrayals you can't come back from, no matter how many times they say they're sorry. I thought it would hurt more letting him go. But the truth is, it was a relief. I didn't realize how heavy the weight of suspicion had been until it was gone. And as for the hoodie, I never saw it again. But sometimes when the air turns crisp and I reach for a sweater, I remember the feel of it, the warmth, the softness, and smile. Because that hoodie wasn't the end of me. It was just the beginning of something better. It's a lazy Sunday afternoon, and I've decided to spend it exactly where I belong, at the local bookstore. The weather outside is perfect for staying indoors. A soft drizzle tapping against the windows while the scent of coffee drifts in from the in-store cafe. I'm wandering aimlessly through the fiction section, pulling books off the shelves, judging them by their covers, and pretending I have the self-control to leave with just one. Spoiler, I do not. I'm deep in the fantasy aisle, flipping through a novel with a ridiculous dragon on the cover, when I feel a presence nearby. You know that moment when someone's close enough to enter your personal bubble, but they aren't exactly invading it? That's the vibe. I glance to the side and spot him. Tall, a bit scruffy in a just rolled out of bed but still looks good way, wearing a beat-up jacket that suggests he's either deeply artistic or perpetually cold. He's standing just a few feet away, scanning the spines of books with a kind of intensity that suggests he knows exactly what he's looking for, but also maybe forgot the title. For a second, I wonder if he's going to try something weird because, let's be honest, men in bookstores are a mixed bag. Some are genuinely nice. Others seem to think the mere act of holding a book makes them a misunderstood genius who's here to rescue you from your intellectual shortcomings. But this guy? He plays it cool. Doesn't rush over. Doesn't throw out a cheesy pickup line. Just exists in the same space. And that's lesson number one, gentlemen. If you want to start a conversation with someone, step one is not making them feel like prey. I go back to my book, hoping I'm projecting the vibe of approachable but not desperate for company. A minute later, I hear a soft chuckle from his direction. Not an obnoxious laugh, just a small, genuine one, like something genuinely amused him. I glance over again, and he's holding a paperback, flipping through the pages. Sorry, he says, catching my eye. It's just, do people really read this stuff? He holds up the book, the most melodramatic vampire romance I've ever seen. The kind where the title is something like Fang Desire, and the cover art is just two sexy, undead people gazing intensely at each other under a blood-red moon. I smirk, judging people's book choices already. Bold move for someone who's hanging out in the fantasy aisle. He laughs, actually laughs, and the tension evaporates. Fair point. I guess we're both guilty. That's the trick, right there. He makes it playful, not judgmental. Too often, people try to strike up conversations by teasing or negging, and it just comes off as condescending. But this guy? He's not putting me down, he's pulling himself into the joke too. So, I say, tilting my head toward the vampire romance. Thinking of branching out? He grins, flipping the book closed. I'm trying to keep my options open. You never know when you'll need emergency romance advice. Vampires are definitely the experts, I deadpan. They've had centuries to figure out relationships. He chuckles again, slipping the book back onto the shelf. Okay, your turn. What's your guilty pleasure read? Without missing a beat, I hold up the book I've been flipping through, a ridiculous fantasy novel with a dragon and some questionable character names. Dragons and awkward romances. No judgment. He whistles, impressed. Solid choice. So, you're more into fire-breathing lizards than brooding vampires. Respect. And just like that, the conversation flows. It's light, funny, and most importantly, easy. No weird power dynamics, no invasive questions. Just two people riffing on books without any expectation of where the interaction is supposed to go. We chat for a few more minutes, bouncing from books we love to books we love to hate. I find out his name is Ryan. He's a graphic designer who's way too into sci-fi, and most surprisingly, he's not here trying to pick anyone up. He's just genuinely into bookstores. A rare breed. At some point, we drift over to a table stacked with staff recommendations. I pick up a thriller, and Ryan leans in, inspecting the title. "That one's great," he says. "But fair warning, you'll end up sleep-deprived." "Oh, good," I reply. Nothing says responsible adulting like staying up all night with a murder mystery. He grins. "I'll take a good book hangover over real life any day." And here's the best part. He's letting the conversation breathe. He's not rushing to get my number, not pushing for more than what the moment offers. We're just talking, and that's the real trick, isn't it? Approach someone like you're not trying to win something. Just enjoy the interaction for what it is. Eventually, we both fall quiet, flipping through different books at the same table. It's not awkward, it's actually kind of nice. I could walk away now, and the whole encounter would still feel good. No pressure, no weirdness, just a brief moment of connection. But then Ryan does something I wasn't expecting. He pulls a small notebook out of his pocket, tears off a page, and scribbles something down. He folds the paper in half and hands it to me with a smile. "In case you ever want to trade dragon recommendations, or if you need backup in the vampire section." I take the paper, glancing at the neat handwriting. It's his number. Simple, no big deal. Just a casual offer. No pressure attached. And that, my friends, is the magic formula. He's not asking for my number. He's offering his. The ball is in my court, and that makes all the difference. "Thanks," I say, slipping the paper into my tote bag. "I'll keep that in mind." He gives me a little salute, grinning. "Enjoy your dragons, Jess." "You too, Ryan. Good luck with the vampires." And just like that, he's off. No lingering, no awkward goodbyes. He doesn't wait around to see if I'll text him right away, and I don't feel like I owe him anything. It's just nice. Look, approaching someone doesn't have to be a high-stakes operation. It's not about perfect timing or nailing the ultimate pickup line. It's about being genuine, reading the room, and knowing when to walk away without making things weird. Ryan didn't hover. He didn't ask invasive questions or act entitled to my time. He just found a natural way to engage, through books we were both already looking at, and kept the conversation light and fun. And the best part? By giving me his number instead of asking for mine, he put the decision in my hands. No pressure, no expectations, just a friendly invitation to connect if I wanted to. And yeah, I texted him, because, honestly, anyone who can pull off a vampire joke without making it weird is someone worth getting to know.